Chapter 1695. Explosive. The former demon emperor, Kuei Lin, committed suicide in Bina City, and all his troops died in battle. Explosive. The former demon emperor, Kuei Lin, committed suicide in Bina City, and all his troops died in battle. Explosive. The former demon emperor, Kuei Lin, committed suicide in Bina City, and all his troops died in battle. An uproar. The moment this news was pushed out from the public account, everyone who saw it was shocked. It was even more popular than the video Yi Zichen had's mo post. In less than an hour, it had already been viewed over 30 billion times. Kuei Lin was dead, and he had committed suicide. His old subordinates had all died in battle. This kind of news was hard for anyone to believe. The mighty and ambitious Kuei Lin had ended up committing suicide in Bina City. His former subordinates, the invincible General Ning, also died in battle. The people of the three realms were instantly in an uproar. They began to discuss the matter with their friends, and the messages backstage were like a tidal wave bursting through a dam. This time, it wasn't just the people of the three realms who paid attention to this news. Even the major powers were shocked. In the preparation group, Lord 7, Kuei Lin committed suicide? How is this possible? Old San, indeed, it doesn't seem like him. His ambition is known throughout the three realms, but he was actually forced to commit suicide. This news is really too shocking. Jade Lake Palace Master. I can't believe Kuei Lin ended up committing suicide. Little Grand Aunt. Is this information accurate? Idealism. The great emperors in the group were all shocked by Kuei Lin's death. They were all members of the alliance, so they naturally knew that Yi Zichen's people were in charge of the official account. Seeing that Zhao Qinna had at him, Yi Zichen popped up in the group. Only idealism. The news is true. Yi Zichen's reply confirmed that Kuei Lin had killed himself. His reply was definitely not just for show. In truth, Yi Zichen had instructed them to do so. A few days ago, Yi Zichen received word that Kuei Lin had committed suicide and his subordinates had all died in battle. When Yi Zichen heard this news, he was no less shocked than anyone else. He hadn't expected Kuei Lin to be defeated so quickly. They couldn't believe that Kuei Lin would commit suicide to end his ambitious life. After hearing the news, he immediately sent people to investigate the authenticity of the news. Whether it was from collecting information from the backstage or sending the great sage and the venerable of numinous treasure to investigate on the spot, the results were the same. Kuei Lin was indeed dead. He had committed suicide. After confirming that Kuei Lin had committed suicide, Yi Zichen spent half a day digesting the news. After thinking it over a few more times, he finally decided to have Zui Mo and the others spread the news. In other words, Kuei Lin had already been dead for several days by the time everyone saw the news. An ambitious and ruthless man had ended up committing suicide. Many people couldn't help but sigh. Most of the comments in the backstage felt sorry for Kuei Lin. It's really the end of a generation of heroes. What a pity. Kuei Lin reigned for tens of thousands of years, and the demons actually flourished. I really don't understand why they dethroned the old demon emperor as soon as he appeared. Kuei Lin is a ruthless and ambitious person. Push me up. I want to show the person who can't understand why Kuei Lin was deposed just because the old devil emperor appeared. The old devil emperor is a religion to the demons. No matter how good Kuei Lin's achievements are, he can't compare to the old devil emperor. What a pity, what a pity. I heard that all of Kuei Lin's old subordinates died in the charge. None of them were captured. They were all good people. Lord 7, he really died? Ocean Emperor. AI, Kuei Lin really was a formidable and ambitious person. Lord 3, even though I hate him, I agree with you. He really is a formidable and ambitious person. Fox Empress, what a pity. It wasn't just the people in the backstage who were sighing. The great emperors in the group felt the same way. Although they'd always been enemies with Kuei Lin, they'd fought for so many years. Now that Kuei Lin had committed suicide in Bina City, and his old subordinates had died in battle for him, the great emperors felt it was a rather sad thing to see. Kuei Lin used to be so awe-inspiring, but in the end, The great emperors in the group couldn't help but sigh. Yi Zichen left the group and sat down at the stone table to read the news. He didn't say anything for a long time. You dealt Kuei Lin a fatal blow. Gu Li sat in front of the stone table, picked up a steaming teapot, and poured himself a cup of tea. Ever since he'd arrived on the 10th Divine Mountain, he'd stuck around and refused to leave. Fortunately, Lu was rather likable. Everyone in Yi Zichen's faction liked her, so they just turned a blind eye to Gu Li. That one eye had made him stay. Yi Zichen glanced at Gu Li. It wasn't hard to tell that Kuei Lin's death had a lot to do with Yi Zichen. A fatal blow? Isn't that the case? Kuei Lin was deposed of the Frigid Pawn's heavy responsibility. Kuei Lin's only bargaining chip wasn't the wavering demons, but the Yao's southern and western regions. He never would have guessed that as soon as you released that video, Iron Tan and Jiao Hai couldn't even fend for themselves. Kuei Lin's final hopes were dashed. How was he going to make a comeback with the remnants of his troops? Gu Li sipped his tea and glanced at Yi Zichen. Don't tell me you don't know yourself. Before coming here, I was impressed by your schemes. Is that so? Yi Zichen nodded, picked up the teapot, and poured himself a cup of tea. This was indeed his scheme, but he'd never guessed that his video would affect Kuei Lin so much. Now, that Kuei Lin was dead, Kuei Lin had taken over. Right? There's something else I need to tell you. Gu Li set his teacup on the table. Kuei Lin's death isn't good news for you. If he'd been alive, he and Kuei Lin could have kept each other in check. Now that he's dead, Kuei Lin will dominate the demon race. And Kuei Lin is an ambitious bastard. His subordinates, the first and third demon gods, have always wanted to invade other races. That's exactly what I was thinking. In truth, Yi Zichen had hoped that Kuei Lin and Kuei Lin would keep each other in check. That way, they'd fight amongst themselves and wouldn't have time to deal with outside matters. Unfortunately, Kuei Lin had been defeated so quickly that Kuei Lin hadn't caused Kuei Lin any trouble. Speaking of which, Yi Zichen could only blame himself. He'd chosen to post that video in order to make Kuei Lin's life miserable. The way he saw it, Kuei Lin had been the demon emperor for tens of thousands of years. He'd surely nurture a faction that no one else knew about, just like Zhou Wu. Who would have guessed that Kuei Lin would be so open and honest? From start to finish, he'd only had so few people. Now, Yi Zichen was worried about how the demons would fare without Kuei Lin to keep them in check. If Kuei Lin really wanted to dominate, he'd be even more difficult to deal with than Kuei Lin. Don't worry about it too much. No one knows if Kuei Lin left any spies in the demons' ranks. Kuei Lin just took over, and it'll take him a lot of time to consolidate the demons' internal affairs. If he's really like Kuei Lin, you'll have no choice but to deal with whatever comes your way, said Gu Li, sipping his tea. Zhou Wu, have you heard anything from Wu? As for Zhou Wu, Yi Zichen really hadn't heard anything at all. The central divine mountain was completely sealed off, and there wasn't the slightest bit of information about it. It was as if the divine mountain had died, and Zhou Wu had vanished without a trace. Who knows? Yi Zichen quietly glanced at his phone's back end. He saw a constant stream of messages, all of them sighing at Kuei Lin's plight. Of course, there were also some who rejoiced in his misfortune, but they were in the minority. Yi Zichen guessed that the entire three realms were feeling the same way. At that moment, Gu Li suddenly put down his teacup and looked out of the courtyard. Yi Zichen did the same. He looked outside. Not long after, a few more people appeared outside, tearing through the air. The leader was an Emperor realm expert. This person was also one of the few commanders left behind from the First Era. Master of the Stars. The Emperor cupped his hands in greeting. Gu Li and Yi Zichen were the twin emperors of the 10th Divine Mountain. It was no secret that they were the twin emperors of the 10th Divine Mountain, so there was nothing wrong with this expert addressing them as such. Gu Li merely nodded. When Yi Zichen saw this, his gaze trembled. These were the scouts he'd dispatched to guard against any sudden attacks from the god race. They'd suddenly returned. Could it be? Chapter 1696. The Guest Tower. Xiao Yumei had sent people to build it after Upheaval City was built. Each of the 9 divine mountains was protected by a holy land. The 10th divine mountain was the divine mountain of the outer realm. Yi Zichen occupied it, so upheaval naturally became its holy land. Furthermore, the Upheaval Alliance frequently interacted with the other divine mountains, and an endless stream of families, big and small, came to pay their respects. The Upheaval Alliance needed a tower like this as a facade to receive visitors. The tower had 9 floors, and 9 represented the extremities. The bottom 3 floors were used to greet foreign guests, while the other 6 floors were used for internal meetings. In truth, this was Yi Zichen's first time back in Upheaval City. In the past, Xiao Yumei and the others handled internal affairs. They only discussed important matters with the Upheaval Alliance. As such, Yi Zichen was more than happy to be a hands-off boss. The Outsider Emperor led the way. Along the way, Yi Zichen and Gu Li saw an endless stream of visitors, as well as plenty of Upheaval Alliance members bustling about. Among these chaotic members, the Supreme Beings still occupied the majority of the number. However, Yi Zichen discovered that there were still quite a few diviners and rulers. In other words, if you disregarded the other Holy Land's secret forces, then Upheaval was far superior to the other divine mountains. Generally, 2 rulers stood guard in front of the tower. When they saw the Outsider Emperor, they knelt on one knee. "Is Vice Alliance head Xiao here?" The 2 sovereign realm experts only replied after the extraterritorial emperor spoke. "Vice Alliance head Xiao and the elders are waiting for you on the top floor." The Outsider Emperor nodded at the 2 rulers, then turned back and said respectfully, "Alliance head, this way please." Yi Zichen and Gu Li walked side by side into the tower. Only then did the Outsider Emperor and the others follow. The 2 sovereigns guarding the door were stunned, and they looked at each other. "That's our alliance head." Xiao Yumei and the others had always been in charge of the Upheaval Alliance. Yi Zichen, who spent most of his time away, rarely showed his face. Most people in the Upheaval Alliance had never seen Yi Zichen's face. Perhaps Xiao Yumei and the others had their own ideas, so they didn't keep a portrait of Yi Zichen. As the 2 rulers stared at each other in silence, Yi Zichen and the others entered the tower. After entering the tower, Yi Zichen discovered that each floor was guarded by an expert, at the very least an emperor. The entire reception tower was also surrounded by a barrier. It was impossible to sense what was going on inside from the outside, but it was possible to spy on the outside from the inside. There were guests visiting the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors of the guest house, and they were received by the deacons of the Alliance. Everyone who saw the Outsider Emperor greeted him, but they were also surprised to see Zichen and Gu Li walking ahead of him. On the top floor of the guest house, compared to the splendor of the lower floors, the top floor was much simpler. This was also arranged according to Xiao Yumei's preferences. She liked simplicity and didn't like flashy but impractical things. The top floor was for the higher-ups like them to discuss matters. Since it wasn't visible to outsiders, it also saved them the hassle. The entire hall on the top floor had a total of 36 seats, divided into 2 rows on the left and right. There were a total of 3 high seats in front of the door. The highest seat faced the crowd, and the 2 seats below faced each other. Compared to the 36 seats below, the only difference was that the seats were higher and closer to the seat in the center. By now, all 36 seats were occupied. Xiao Yumei sat to the left of the seat in the center. No one in the hall opened their mouths to speak. However, there was a layer of dense and solemn aura that enveloped the entire hall. Thud, thud. Clear, hurried footsteps sounded from outside the hall. The Outsider Emperor was the first to enter. After stepping into the hall, he stopped at the entrance and looked outside. Xiao Yumei had already risen from her seat, and the occupants of the other 36 seats rose with her. Next, they watched as a shadow, elongated by the sunlight, entered the hall. Only then did Yi Zichen and Gu Li enter the hall. Alliance head, Xiao Yumei's expression was solemn. The others bowed and greeted her as well. Anyone who could sit in this hall could sense that they were all emperors based on the auras they gave off. There were quite a few experts Yi Zichen had never met before, as well as quite a few old acquaintances. For example, Xiao Hu and Xiao Yan. However, Xiao didn't have the right to sit. He could only stand behind Xiao Yan. What astonished him even more was that Su Lu and Su Yan were present as well. That wasn't all. Zhuo Mo, Go Yuzhan, Yin Shang, and the others were present as well. Yi Zichen nodded at them. He sensed that the atmosphere was rather tense, so he said nothing else. He glanced at the decorations and knew full well that the seat in the center was reserved for him. He walked straight to the seat in the center and sat down. To his surprise, Guli followed him and sat to his right. Only after Yi Zichen and Guli took their seats did the others follow suit. General Li, let's begin. Xiao Yumei waved at the outsider emperor. General Li took a few steps forward and said, "This matter is rather complicated. Please, everyone, take a look at a video." With that, General Li walked up to Zhuo Mo. "Miss Sua, please present the contents of this video to the Alliance head and the council members." General Li handed Zhuo Mo a cell phone. The instant he handed it over, Yi Zichen vaguely saw the veins on General Li's arms bulge and his eyes redden. After handing over the phone, General Li retreated to the side. Zhuo Mo clicked open the video with practiced ease, then waved at the technicians she'd brought with her. In the blink of an eye, a screen of water appeared before everyone's eyes. The video began. Everyone saw a platoon of over 100 people. They were led by 3 divine generals, 15 rulers, and the rest were diviner experts. Judging from the video's environment, they were most likely in the outer realms. Several minutes passed, but nothing noteworthy appeared in the video, until Deputy General Zheng Lil 6 is missing. The entire platoon came to a stop. The camera scanned their surroundings several times, but still found nothing out of the ordinary. "Don't worry about it. Stick close to the group. Don't fall behind." The platoon continued advancing, but before long. "Oh well, Wang's gone. Oh well, who isn't with us either? You guys look monster." Chapter 1698. No matter how the clan heads and elders tried to explain, Yi Zichen's expression didn't give him any leeway. They feared the upheaval alliance's power, and they were subordinates of the alliance. They didn't dare resist in the slightest. They obediently followed Xiao Yumei out of the guest tower. That's more like it. How could people like them have the right to participate in the meeting? Guli narrowed his eyes, glanced at the spineless outsiders, and laughed contemptuously. The other people in the hall were also quite dissatisfied with those people. It was not until they were invited out of the guest tower that the expressions of the others became slightly better. After a while, Xiao Yumei reappeared. If she'd simply asked them to leave, it wouldn't have taken so long. Clearly, after sending them away, Xiao Yumei consoled them a little. "Big sister, there's no need to care about those spineless fools," said Xiao Yan. "You've been the Xiao family's lightning emperor for so long. Is this all you've got?" It was obvious that Xiao Yan was afraid of his sister. When he saw her frown, he swallowed the words he was about to say. His eyes darted around, but he didn't dare meet her gaze. It's good that they've been asked to leave. They don't have much skill, but they talk more than anyone else. Go Yuzhan, who'd never sat properly, swayed as a hogue. He twisted his body, then changed his position. "Enough," said Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen stopped the gossip in the hall. Although he didn't want those spineless people to appear, he understood Xiao Yumei's actions. Although the Upheaval Alliance ruled a single divine mountain, it was far from comparable to the other divine mountains, which had existed since the beginning of the god race. Of the dozen or so cities, only the central Upheaval City had any inhabitants. The cities of the Second Ring were sparsely populated, and the Third Ring hadn't been open to the public. Xiao Yumei naturally had to treat the Upheaval Alliance's clans well. She'd invited the clan heads and elders to participate in the meeting in order to deepen their feelings for the Upheaval Alliance. As the head of the alliance, Yi Zichen's words naturally carried considerable weight. The clamor in the hall instantly died down. Yi Zichen gestured for Xiao Yumei to take a seat, then swept his gaze over the Upheaval Alliance experts. "What do you think of the essence-breaking beasts in the video? What opinion can he have? As long as they dare to come, Grandpa Go Yuzhan will be willing to see him off." Go Yuzhan snorted without hesitation. His auxiliary star flickered in his hand, and his tone was filled with disdain. Yi Zichen and Guli raised their eyebrows in unison. To tell the truth, he was even more proficient at using starlight than they were, even though they were from the Emperor's star. Especially when Go Yuzhan's starlight appeared. The space in the room became somewhat chaotic. The people in the hall could also sense that the palm-sized ball of starlight in his hand seemed to possess the power to destroy the world. Brat, can you not recklessly release it? The replenishment of starlight is very time-consuming, Shang said. So what if I use it a little? Go Yuzhan dispersed the starlight in his hand resentfully. Judging from his expression, it seemed that his fear of Shang had reached a subconscious level. However, he quickly glared at Shang and said, Do I, the minister of the right, need you, the minister of the left? You could beat me in the past, but you can't beat me now. Then why don't you try fighting Big Sister Lu? With that, Go Yuzhan snuck a glance at Su Lu. Even though Shang had mentioned her, her expression was the same as ever. She sat upright in her chair, looking straight ahead. Even from afar, they could sense her icy aura, which repelled everyone within 1,000 miles. Big Sister Lua? Since when were they so familiar with each other? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows and looked at the three of them. In truth, when he saw them, Yi Zichen was already beyond curious. In less than 2 short months, Go Yuzhan and Shang both radiated the aura of emperors. Su Lu didn't even need to be mentioned. She was already terrifyingly strong, but now she was more than twice as strong as before. Big Sister Lu, what do you think? Asked Yi Zichen. It's hard to deal with. Su Lu's vermilion lips parted as she spat out those 3 words. To Go Yuzhan, this was like a slap to the face. He blurted out, Big Sister Lu, I'm just voicing my most direct opinion. Do you have a problem with that? A gust of biting cold wind blew past the entrance of the hall. In the blink of an eye, the entire palace was covered in a thin layer of ice. Go Yuzhan licked his lips, not daring to say a single word. His ahogue drooped like a frosted eggplant as he fiddled with his fingers. Yi Zichen was somewhat stunned that Su Lu would say it would be difficult. Judging from her aura, she was already at the Imperial Emperor realm. The cold aura she'd released just now had the aura of condensing an ice-type Dao heart. Given her cultivation, if she said it would be difficult to deal with, then it was a direct reflection of how terrifying an aura-breaking beast was. I'm just being conservative, said Su Lu. You might hurt General Li's heart. Even though your son risked his life to deliver the video to you through a secret technique, and even though you're proud that your son never abandoned his comrade in battle, in my eyes, there's still a possibility that you might hurt General Li's feelings. No one expected Su Lu to say something like that. No one would have guessed Su Lu would say something like that. Everyone's gazes shifted, then they heard her continue. If he'd abandoned his pride and returned from the outside, then having personally experienced the aura-breaking beast, he'd be able to understand it more directly. Right now, all we can do is sit here and watch the short video he recorded. It's less than an hour long, and we can't even understand the beast's aura or aura. All we can do is judge it based on its enormous size and how it devoured the other heroes. That in itself is illogical. For what I understand, just because it's big doesn't mean it's strong. Even devouring the other heroes doesn't prove how difficult it is to deal with. Trying to tell us how strong our future enemy will be based on a single video isn't just careless. It's also a waste of time. I really don't understand why General Li summoned us here so urgently just because of a video. What exactly are you trying to do? The atmosphere in the palace plummeted. Su Lu's words were like rubbing salt into General Li's wounds. His son had died in battle, and his heart was already riddled with scars. Only the fact that his son had risked his life to bring back a video and could be called a hero was enough to give him some peace of mind. But now, Su Lu was disparaging the precious video his son had risked his life to bring back. The kind-hearted Su Yin couldn't help but tug at Su Lu's clothes. General Li's arms trembled uncontrollably. Chapter 1699. General Li trembled with rage. He glared at Su Yin for a long time, then nodded forcefully, snatched the phone from Zhuomo's hands, and left. Yi Zichen looked at Su Lu in confusion. As far as he could remember, Su Lu was domineering, but she definitely wasn't an unreasonable person. No matter what, the dead had to be respected. General Li's son risking his life to retrieve the footage was already commendable. Even if Su Lu was telling the truth, it was still a bit excessive. "General Li!" exclaimed Xiao Yumei. General Li didn't even look back. She hurriedly signaled Xiao Yan with her eyes. Xiao Yan and Xiao Hu understood and followed General Li out of the hall. "Big Sister Lu, said Yi Zichen. "I'm just telling the truth. He's different from the others. He's experienced the God Race's invasion, so he should know better than anyone how important it is to understand the Aura Breaker beasts. Unfortunately, his understanding of the Aura Breaker beasts is limited to his son's footage. Don't you think that's ridiculous? Is that so?" Su Lu's eyes flashed with cold light. Her cold demeanor rendered Yi Zichen completely speechless. Before she'd even finished speaking, she snorted once more. "Don't call me Big Sister Lu, I can't bear to hear you call me that. Lil Yin, let's go." Su Lu dragged Su Yin out of the hall. Everyone else in the hall looked at each other. No one knew why Su Lu was so angry. Could it be that Big Sister Lu has reached the point where all women go through a few days? Go Yuzhan muttered cautiously, his head drooping. Inshang glared at him, then covered his mouth. "It seems to me you don't want to live anymore." Yi Zichen glanced at the empty chairs. He never would have guessed things would develop to this point. "You may go check on Big Sister Lu. Everyone else, go back." Several people left in a huff. It seemed this meeting would be difficult to continue. Everyone else stood up and bid farewell to Yi Zichen. They sat in their chairs, looked around the empty hall, and couldn't help but pinch their heads. "Perhaps I shouldn't have come," said Gu Li. Yi Zichen moved his hand away from his head. "Then why did you follow me here and intentionally destroy the unity of our alliance? Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't use such a lousy method." Gu Li shrugged. "I just didn't expect them to be here. I didn't expect them to still be so prejudiced against me. She has a strong opinion of you. Big Sister Lu, is already being magnanimous by not killing you directly." Yi Zichen waved at Gu Li, then rubbed his head. "You should leave too. Let me sit here by myself for a while." Everyone had left. A gentle breeze blew in from the open doors, causing Yi Zichen's shadow to sway along with the flickering candlelight. Yi Zichen could understand why Su Lu was so angry. Back when the demons had invaded, the Endless Beast region, the Immortal region, the Heavenly Court, and the Underworld had lost far too many people. Yuan Hong had died in that invasion. Not only was he Yi Zichen's good friend, but he was also Lu's true love and the great sage's brother. After interacting with Lu, Gu Li had changed dramatically. It was fair to say that he was completely different from his former self. It was said that the prodigal son was worth more than gold. Gu Li suddenly came to a realization. Although Yi Zichen was hostile toward him, he had subtly accepted him. The great sage hated him, but for the sake of the greater good, he hadn't targeted him. But Su Lu, undoing the knot in her heart was far too difficult. Even if Gu Li had become the savior of the world and saved billions of lives, in Su Lu's eyes, he was still Yuan Hong's executioner. No matter what Gu Li did, he couldn't change this fact. Ding dong, ding dong. A cell phone notification suddenly rang out in the hall. In such a quiet environment, the notification sound was especially loud. Yi Zichen, tormented by his melancholy, helplessly took out his phone and opened his social media app. The sender was a stranger, one of the God Emperor's trusted divine arbiter. There were only 2 messages, and they were short. "Are you there?" Yi Zichen tapped the screen, composed a message, and sent it back. "Only idealism. I'm here. Why are you looking for me?" "Right, I haven't had a chance to thank you for helping me back in the tomb." "Stranger, even without me, Yuchi Kong and the others wouldn't be able to do anything to you with that person in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda." "Only idealism. I should still thank you." Back in the tomb's real room, Yi Zichen had been in grave danger while trying to stop Yuchi Kong and Huang Fu Yuming. Fortunately, the divine arbiter had arrived just in time. After blocking a fatal blow, Yi Zichen had used peach juice as bait to summon Song Xiong. As for the god-destroying crossbow, in truth, it hadn't been of much use. The crossbow had already been used before, so using it a second time was practically useless. Yi Zichen had only used the crossbow to intimidate Song Xiong. It was all to stall for time with him. Stranger, if you want to thank me, you might as well kill Yu Kong. Stranger, if he told Zhou Wu what happened back then, it would inevitably cause a rift between me and Zhou Wu. Stranger, speaking of which, Yu Kong should be in your Yao Ceiling Pagoda, right? What's the point of keeping him around? Only idealism. That's right. Stranger, you want to use him to keep the Yu Qi and Huangfu families in check? You got some guts. In response, Yi Zichen merely replied with a polite smile, but didn't say anything else. At the end of the day, the Divine Arbiter had never explicitly expressed her intention to join the alliance, but she had made it clear that she would serve Zhou Wu, even if she died. Yi Zichen had the right not to tell her anything that touched on secrets. The Divine Arbiter had already mentioned that she could do this. Stranger, fine, no matter what you do with him, I hope he won't say anything. Only idealism. I'm not sure. Stranger, you're trying to put me in deep trouble. Only idealism. Absolutely not. I'll do my best to keep Yu Kong in line. Only idealism. You didn't call me just to chat, did you? Is there something you want to talk to me about? When he said that, the Divine Arbiter fell silent for a long time. Yi Zichen stared at his phone screen for at least 100 breaths before he saw the message she was typing on the screen. Stranger, I'm struggling. Only idealism. When you decided to call me, even if you were struggling, your heart was already leaning towards me. Tell me, did Zhou Wu do something so cruel that you think he's gone crazy? Stranger, yes. When he saw the reply, Yi Zichen was visibly stunned. In truth, he just said it casually. He hadn't really expected to hit the mark. Only idealism. What did Zhou Wu do this time? Chapter 1700. The Divine Arbiter indicated that she had other matters to take care of. Yi Zichen scrolled through the chat, then stared at the messages for a long time in a daze. Yi Zichen's emotions were in turmoil. He needed time to digest the news. If a person was shrouded in pressure for an extended period of time, they'd go insane. In order to maintain a normal state of mind, he needed some cheerful music to ease his emotions. He clicked on the music on his phone and found a song that had once been popular all over the world. It was the most dazzling ethnic style. You're the most beautiful cloud in my sky. Let me keep you with all my heart. He sang the most dazzling ethnic style leisurely and let love sweep away all the dust. It had to be said that the song was magical. When Yi Zichen heard it, he subconsciously moved his limbs to the rhythm of the song. There were also some indescribable emotions mixed in. I miss it so much. I've been away from the modern realm for far too long. I really don't know when I'll be able to go back and live the life of an ordinary mortal. It seems I was thinking too much, murmured Xiao Yumei. Yi Zichen looked up, smiled at her, then turned off the music. And here I thought you'd grimace. I didn't think you'd be in such a good mood. Ha! Yi Zichen grinned. It seemed the most dazzling ethnic style really was a huge boost to his morale. There were clearly so many things weighing down on his shoulders, yet he could still smile so brightly. Yi Zichen flipped his palm and smiled at Xiao Yumei. Do you want me to play a bit longer so you can relieve some of your stress? Sure. The rhythmic, most dazzling ethnic style resounded throughout the guest tower. As the song played, both Yi Zichen and Xiao Yumei felt indescribably relaxed. After playing it over 10 times, Xiao Yumei smiled and turned it off. What is it? Even if you want to relax, you have to control yourself. This isn't the time to relax, said Xiao Yumei calmly. Xiao Yumei's gaze was calm. She pushed her phone back to Yi Zichen, then said, Sulu or went to the outside. Is that so? Yi Zichen wasn't too surprised. He could tell what Sulu was saying out of anger and what was the truth. When she said that she wanted to go to the outer realms, her eyes revealed her determination. Are you going to let her go by herself? Yi Zichen's words were merely a question. He believed that Xiao Yumei was very meticulous. Yang Jian and the great sage followed them. I want to send the venerable of numinous treasure as well, but that guy's too lazy to move, right? Yi Zichen understood. Xiao Yumei nodded. Yi Zichen nodded and smiled. Yang Jian and the great sage will be enough. They'll be able to handle any unexpected situations very well. Besides, Su Lu, and the others are all imperial emperors. Who knows? They might bring back some pleasant surprises for us. Are you surprised? Xiao Yumei murmured to herself as a hint of seriousness flashed through her eyes. Will we really have to deal with these guys in the future? You might not be happy if I tell you, but I'm actually quite scared. The berserk beasts in the video were too ferocious. They'd been led by 3 divine generals and 100 diviners and rulers, but in less than 100 breaths of time, they'd been annihilated. Although the video didn't reveal the berserk beast's true strength, it was still possible to deduce that. Even imperial emperors would find it difficult to accomplish such a feat. If you're afraid just because of this, then when they really attack the Third Era, you'll feel even more despair. Yi Zichen didn't blame Xiao Yumei for her fear, but he didn't try to comfort her, either. She was indeed a woman, but she was an imperial emperor. Not only that, but she was also the deputy alliance head of the Upheaval Alliance. She could act weak in front of Yi Zichen, but that was because she was his woman, and he was her pillar of support. Outside, however, she was a lofty imperial emperor and deputy alliance head. Her every word and action affected the alliance's members' confidence. No matter how afraid she was, she had to overcome her fear. That was the only way to boost the Upheaval Alliance's members' confidence. Yi Zichen trusted that Xiao Yumei understood all this, so he didn't say anything more. Xiao Yumei sat on the chair and sighed. At that moment, a long shadow appeared at the entrance of the hall. The figure's appearance was immediately noticed by Yi Zichen and Xiao Yumei, who both looked towards the door. Alliance head, deputy alliance head, there are a few people outside. No need. Let me introduce myself to Alliance head Yi. Suddenly, several figures appeared at the empty palace door. Among them, there were 5 children who looked like babies floating in the air, and there was also a young girl who looked like a lowly, followed by a middle-aged elder who looked a little old. You. When he saw the 5 babies, Yi Zichen's brows furrowed. The 5 babies in front of him were none other than the 5 elemental fairies of the tomb. As Yi Zichen furrowed his brows, the wind elemental fairy hid behind the fire elemental fairy in fear. The lowly girl was Gu Luolin. As for the middle-aged man beside her, Yi Zichen didn't know who he was. You're dismissed. The 5 elemental fairies waved at the Upheaval Alliance member. Their eyes were clearly nervous. The middle-aged man watched them leave, then enter the hall. Big nephew. Gu Luolin, on the other hand, had no time to think. She called out big nephew and ran over to Yi Zichen. When Xiao Yumei saw her, she couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. She'd recently caused quite a stir in the Upheaval Alliance. However, Gu Luolin was Yi Zichen's elder, and Yi Zichen had told her in private that Gu Luolin was still a member of the Gu family. As a result, no matter how much trouble she caused, the Upheaval Alliance could only turn a blind eye. Why do you have time to come all the way here? What? You don't want to? Gu Luolin pouted, then pointed at the middle-aged man. Come in. At this moment, the middle-aged man heard the commotion and arrived. Gu Luolin also proudly introduced. He's my father's bodyguard, so you can call him Blueprint. Just call me Blueprint. The middle-aged man smiled amiably, then pointed at the elemental fairies. Alliance head Yi, it seems you really do know these fairies. I saw them circling outside Upheaval City, so I took it upon myself to bring them to you. You won't blame me, will you? In truth, this was just a polite greeting. When Gu Luolin said Blueprint was her father's bodyguard, Blueprint's background was obvious. He was a member of the Gu family, and his status wasn't low either. When other clans saw an ancient, they had to treat him well, even if he was a servant, let alone an ancient family head's personal bodyguard. Chapter 17:01. Lan Jingrong's smile froze. He forced himself to smile, but before he could say anything else, are you a member of the Upheaval Alliance? I'm not. If you're not, then what right do you have to bring outsiders here? You only got in because of Luo Lin, but you don't have the slightest bit of respect here. Do you know what they're here for? Do you know what their intentions were when they came to me? Do you know who I am? If these elemental fairies want to harm me, and something happens to me, can you bear the consequences? A cold wind howled. A gust of frigid wind blew in through the doors, causing the temperature to plummet. The light from the tower's windows shone into Yi Zichen's eyes. The instant he narrowed them, the majestic aura of an emperor, which he'd held for so long, poured out in torrents. Yizichen's barrage of questions left the Gu family head's guard speechless for a long time. He stood in a daze, as if shocked by Yizichen's attitude toward the Gu family. He also wondered if his actions were truly beyond his authority. Perhaps he really had acted thoughtlessly. In the past, when they went to other clans, even if it was a holy land, they would be courteous to them due to the prestige of the Aboriginals. But this place was different. Although the Upheaval Alliance was a faction, it had united several of the God Realm's divine mountains and was on good terms with the Yao and Sacred Beast clans. The God Realm's territory hadn't changed in billions of years, but now a divine mountain had appeared. Its leader, Yizichen, was the Lord of the Stars of the Third Era. Even though the Upheaval Alliance had only been established for a short time, it couldn't be treated as an ordinary faction. At that moment, the fire elemental fairy blazed with flames. It transformed into a streak of red light and landed 3 meters in front of Yizichen. The flames on its body were pure white, but they didn't emit the slightest bit of heat. However, everyone knew it had the power to incinerate heaven and earth. He was infuriated. He and his brothers were elemental fairies of the 5 elements. Anyone who ran into them would have to negotiate politely and beg them to attach themselves to them. Yet Yizichen had left the 5 elements palace despite knowing who they were. After some discussion, they'd taken the initiative to ask for peace, but they hadn't even entered. They'd circled around Chaos City for several days. After much difficulty, he finally entered the guest tower, but before he could even say a word, he was once again met with cold stares. "What do you mean? Are you saying that we will harm you?" The fire elemental sprite glared, and the flames on its body grew a little higher. "Don't mess around here. This isn't your elemental space. This is this Star-Lord's Chaos City." Yizichen looked at the elemental fairies coldly, but from Blueprint's perspective, those words were actually directed at him. "Alliance Leader Yi, I didn't mean to offend you. Please forgive me," Blueprint said. The Blueprint was at least an Imperial Lord. In truth, Yizichen had a very good impression of him for being able to lower himself to such an extent. Although he'd spoken rather insolently when he'd first entered the palace, he'd been able to reflect on himself and adjust in time. Yizichen liked people who knew when to advance and when to retreat. "It's fine." Yizichen waved his hand towards the Blueprint, indicating that it was over. As for the 5 elements elemental spirits, he didn't even spare them a glance. Even at this moment, he still thought too highly of himself, couldn't see the situation clearly, and didn't know when to advance or retreat. It seemed that these elemental spirits were really spoiled. It was said that if a small tree wasn't straight, it had to be fixed. It was about time they were fixed as well. Yizichen ignored the elemental spirits and looked at Blueprint. "May I ask why you've come to the evil lands, Gar Blueprint?" The young lady snuck out of the clan. While she was gone, the entire clan was in chaos. Although the family head found out that the young lady was with you, she's been gone for too long. The family head and matriarch miss her, so they wanted to take her back with me, said Blueprint. They wanted to take Luolin back with them? Xiao Yumei and Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. This was great news. This was great news. Gu Luolin was causing trouble in Chaos City, and Xiao Yumei was suffering unspeakably. Yi Zichen had heard the same news. He'd long since wanted her to hurry up and leave, but she just happened to like Chaos City. No matter how he chased her away, she wouldn't leave. Add to that her relationship with Yi Rong, and the fact that the ancient clan was a major family clan. Yi Zichen had no way of suppressing her by force. He could only hope that the ancient clan would hurry back and take her away. He'd been waiting for this day and night, and it was finally here. However, Yi Zichen couldn't make it too obvious. Otherwise, if Gu Luolin got angry and refused to leave, then the guard wouldn't dare to do anything to her. It's normal for parents to want a woman. Luolin, go back with Gar Blueprint. I'm already preparing to go back. Gu Luolin giggled. Yi Zichen didn't expect her to agree so readily. Gu Luolin had always hated her family. It wasn't that her family wasn't good. It was simply because she was the youngest in the clan. She didn't want to be treated like a child. She wanted to be an elder, so she didn't want to go back. Yizichin had thought that it would take a lot of effort to persuade her, but Gulualin's reply gave him a bad feeling. Alliance head Yi, Blueprint has something else to say. The family head, in consideration of how Alliance head Yi has been taking care of the young lady recently, the family head would like to invite you to visit the ancient clan in order to express his gratitude. As expected, no wonder Gu Luolin agreed so readily. The Gu family head wanted Yi Zichin to go as well. As long as Yi Zichin went, Gu Luolin wouldn't be the youngest in the ancient clan. As long as she wasn't the youngest, she would be happy. Yi Zichin didn't want to go to the ancient clan. Perhaps it was because of Gu Zichin's experiences that Yi Zichin felt an indescribable resistance towards the ancient clan. Or perhaps it was because the ancient clan was too mysterious and Yi Zichin didn't want to get too involved with them. Either way, he just didn't want to. "Hey, I'm talking to you." The fire elemental fairy suddenly roared. "Don't go too far. You guys are really interesting." Yi Zichin was naturally happy to be able to change the subject. This time, he didn't argue with Blueprint. He looked towards the fire elemental fairy. "I already said it very clearly. I don't need you guys. Just stay here. Why did you run over to my place?" Boss," the lightning elemental fairy shouted in a low voice. Then he walked out and said, "Please forgive us, Planet Master. Previously, it was indeed our attitude that was wrong. However, we elemental fairies of the 5 elements should follow you around. Perhaps you have a problem with us, but this is an irreversible truth. Well, we've thought it through. If you don't agree, then we'll just stay here and not leave." "Yeah, we won't leave." The water elemental fairy, who was already incredibly lazy, directly laid down on the ground. Making a scene? If these elemental fairies really did make a scene and stayed here, then Yi Zichin really wouldn't be able to handle it. Chapter 1702. He'd rather go to the ancients than have too much contact with the 5 elemental fairies. Although he'd agreed to Blueprint's invitation, he couldn't just leave like that. He still had some matters to take care of in the Upheaval Alliance, and Blueprint wanted to take a look around. As such, they agreed to meet the ancients the next morning. As for the 5 elemental fairies, if they liked to stay in the guest tower, they could. They might as well leave the top floor to them. Yi Zichin, Xiao Yumei, and the others directly left. "Why did you stop me just now? Look at his attitude." The fire elemental elf, whose body was burning with flames, glared fiercely. It was obvious how furious he was from the erratic flames on his body. He was the leader of the elements, yet he'd been ignored like this. They were certain that Yi Zichin knew about their arrival, but he'd deliberately left them outside for several days. "I know, right? Isn't it a blessing for us elemental fairies to attach ourselves to someone else? I don't think we should waste our time with him. This era has chosen 2 emperors. Let's just go find that emperor's star," snorted the lightning elemental fairy. "Fools!" When he heard the fire and lightning elemental fairy's words, the lightning elemental fairy's body crackled with electricity. His expression was solemn and furious as he roared at them. If they'd said something like this back in the tomb, the lightning elemental fairy might have understood. But now that they were here, they knew full well that Yi Zichin's Upheaval Alliance was on the 10th Divine Mountain. In the previous 2 eras, which Master of the Stars had ever created a new divine mountain. Regardless of how this mountain had appeared, it was clear that Yi Zichin was different from the previous Masters of the Stars. The 5 elements were especially compatible with their 5 elements, and the 5 elements crown was also in his hands. Yet he still wanted to attach himself to someone else? If this wasn't foolish, what was? The fire and lightning elemental fairies angrily sat on chairs. Thanks to their presence, the 5 elements around the guest tower grew much denser. "Then what should we do? Are we really just going to stay here?" asked the lightning elemental fairy. "Wouldn't it be better if we just stayed?" said the water elemental fairy. "Don't even think about looking for someone else. I hate trouble more than anything. He's this era's Master of the Stars, and he's proficient in the Tao of the 5 elements. He's fated to be our subordinate. He knows full well that. For the time of this epoch not long after, with his attainments, even if he has the crown of 5 elements, his Tao of the five elements will not be able to reach the stage of returning to its original state. At that time, he will naturally fuse with us. For a lazy water, elemental sprite to be able to speak so much was definitely a rare occurrence. The elemental elves who knew him were surprised that he had spoken so much, but they couldn't help but affirm his words. Don't tell me I'm just going to hang around like this. That's right. Let's continue like this. Alliance Master's residence. Yi Zichen sat in front of the stone table and scrolled through the background of his phone. The keyword he saw in the search bar was ancient race. He wanted to try and see if he could find any information regarding the ancient race in the information network. The results were inevitably disappointing. Even though there was information from the ancient race behind the scenes, the content of the information was very shallow. It seemed that anyone who became a ruler would have to go to the ancient race. To the outside world, the ancient race was still considered a mysterious power. In other words, even if the Aboriginals knew something about the internal situation of the Aboriginals, they wouldn't dare to sell this information. The Gu race was far more terrifying than Yi Zichen had imagined. Have you decided to go to the ancient race? Xiao Yumei entered the residence. Yi Zichen put down his phone and saw her stunning face. A hint of a smile tugged at his lips. He nodded, then showed her his phone. I want to go and take a look, but before that, I want to understand more about them. Unfortunately, our information on the ancient race is very ordinary. That's only natural. Xiao Yumei shrugged. You've never been to the ancient race, so you can't understand how they feel. After leaving, they don't even dare discuss the ancient race. Not to mention selling the core intelligence of the ancient races. Have you been to the ancient race? Of course, but that was 10,000 years ago. At the time, I hadn't reincarnated yet. When I became a ruler, Xiao Ting took me to the ancient race. His place. Yi Zichen tried to say something, but stopped himself. Xiao Yumei's eyes filled with inexplicable reverence. I can't say. Her reply left Yi Zichen speechless. He and Xiao Yumei could be considered close relatives, yet she still didn't want to say too much about the ancient race. They were truly strange. Yi Zichen wiped his lips, then furrowed his brows. Then can you tell me what it is about the ancient race that you're so afraid of? If it's inconvenient, then don't tell me. In any case, I'll go tomorrow. I'll find out then. All I can tell you is that the ancient race has 3 half-step transcendence experts. Whoosh, a cold wind howled past, causing the scattered leaves in the courtyard to dance in the wind. Yi Zichen's hand, gripping his phone, trembled inexplicably. He slowly looked up and saw Xiao Yumei's solemn gaze. Half-step transcendence. She was actually at the same level as the old dragon god. Only now did he realize that Gu Luolin hadn't been exaggerating. With 3 half-step transcendence experts, let alone the demons, they could even wipe out the Yao and God realms without a problem. It was no wonder that no one else dared mention the ancient race. No one knew what half-step transcendence experts were capable of. If he said something he shouldn't and offended these half-step transcendence experts, then he'd be in deep trouble. In any case, when you go to the ancient race tomorrow, control your temper. The place is truly filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Yi Zichen nodded. Since he already knew the ancient race had 3 half-step transcendence experts, he no longer entertained the thought of prying into their secrets. Yi Zichen locked his phone and took a few deep breaths to adjust his emotions. Are the elemental spirits still on the top floor? Yes. I sent 2 emperors proficient in the Tao of space to keep an eye on them. The elemental spirits are rather well behaved, so they're active on the top floor, said Xiao Yumei. Send down my orders. Anyone who has comprehended the Tao of the 5 elements, regardless of which element they are, is to go to the guest tower. It won't be long before the elemental energy there thickens. Since they like to stay there, we shouldn't waste their goodwill. All right. When the 2 emperors sent back the message, they also mentioned that the 5 elements were getting thicker. Even if Yi Zichen hadn't mentioned it, Xiao Yumei would have mentioned it anyway. Chapter 17:03. Clouds swirled in the air. A towering building pierced through the clouds. A man and a woman sat on the balcony, seemingly in love. That little girl from the Xiao family. The handsome young man laughed and shook his head. The woman beside him laughed as well. She said it, so be it. It's not like she broke the rules. The Emperor Star is also a member of the Gu family. That's true, but it's not like you didn't see that kid's expression. When he arrives tomorrow, he'll definitely act reserved since he knows her cultivation levels. Do you think he won't act reserved if she doesn't say it? This is the Gu race. This was the Gu race. These few words were enough to make everyone tremble in fear. Even if the god, Yao, and demon emperors were here, they wouldn't be able to act so casually. This was the tyranny of the Gu race. It made all living beings tremble. That's true. The handsome man gently nodded his head. With a wave of his right hand, the clouds surrounding them were dispersed to another place. He put his arm around the woman's shoulders and sat down. He gently poured 2 cups of tea, then pushed one of them to the woman. Do you think he'll agree to be surnamed Gu? Why do you ask that all of a sudden? The woman took a sip and smiled. Are you thinking about that uninvited guest who showed up a few days ago? You could say that. It can't be. Do you really believe what he said? I have a feeling that what that person said doesn't seem to be false. Father cares about this as well. He agrees with the white-robed man. Then you want to... Tomorrow, I want to give it a try. A solemn light flashed through the handsome man's eyes. He looked at the woman with shining eyes, as if seeking her approval and support. The woman smiled, put down her cup of tea, and covered his hand with hers. I support you. The next morning, it did feel like autumn had arrived, and the morning wind was a little chilly. He'd agreed to go to the Gu race that day, and Yi Zichen kept his word. Early in the morning, he and the others arrived outside the city. Xiao Yumei and the Upheaval Alliance sent them off. Alliance head Yi, do you need some more time? Blue Blueprint, who was walking in front, had a smile on his face. He carried a pitch-black long sword on his back, which made him look like a swordsman. He'd explained everything he needed to yesterday. He smiled at Xiao Yumei and the others. Yi Zichen didn't say anything else. He just walked up to Lan Yinyu. When he went over, Blueprint had already used the long sword on his back to outline a complicated spirit map. The Gu race didn't reside in the 3 realms. They lived entirely in alternate dimensions. If they wanted to go to the Gu race, they had to take. Alliance head Yi, we have to go. Lan Xuanyu smiled. Under Yi Zichen's approval, a dazzling blue light suddenly shone from the Ling-Tu beneath his feet. The blue light instantly sealed off an area of 100 meters. Xiao Yumei and the others couldn't use their divine senses at all. The violent storm created countless cyclones around Ling-Tu. The surrounding flowers, grass, and trees were all bent by the wind. Xiao Yumei and the others in the city were also unable to look directly at the dazzling blue light. However, neither the storm nor the blinding light had any real offensive power. When the storm receded, the blue light disappeared as well. By the time they looked back at the spirit diagram, Yi Zichen, Lan Yinyu, and Gu Luolin had long since disappeared. Not only that, but there were no spatial fluctuations around them. It was impossible to tell where they'd gone. As expected of the Gu race, Xiaohu couldn't help but sigh. Gu Luolin was the Gu race's pearl. Everyone in the Upheaval Alliance knew that. Lan Yinyu had come to Chaos City to pick her up, and Yi Zichen had gone with them to the Gu race. That's right, someone murmured. They'd all been to the Gu race before. Only those who had been to the ancient race could truly understand just how strong they were. Lan Yinyu's spirit diagram had sealed off everything within 100 kilometers, preventing them from using their spiritual energy to spy on them. Once the seal faded, they couldn't sense the Gu race's location through spatial fluctuations. Not even the Grandmasters of the Supreme Hall could do such a thing. Don't sigh. Everyone knows how strong the Gu race is. The Alliance head is going to the Upheaval Alliance, so we'll have to take care of internal affairs. Hurry up and get back to work. Xiao Yan, Xiaohu, go find Yin Shang and Go Yuzhan. I have something to discuss with you. Green mountains, clear waters, birdsong, and the fragrance of flowers. Yi Zichen rode the spirit diagram through the spatial corridor. By the time he came to his senses, he'd appeared in front of a clear stream. The water was so clear that he could see the bottom. Smooth pebbles filled the riverbed. From time to time, he'd see nimble fish darting between the pebbles. A few willow trees grew by the riverbank. Their branches and leaves fell to the ground, and when the wind blew, they rustled. Quite a few birds perched among the willow trees, chirping incessantly. A delicate fragrance wafted over. Yizichin looked in the direction of the fragrance and saw a flower bed that stretched as far as the eye could see. Flowers of different colors grew luxuriantly in the flower bed. Countless colorful butterflies could be seen dancing in the flower bed. But none of these were Yao. The fish in the stream, the birds in the willow trees, and the butterflies in the flower bed were all ordinary creatures. These were the most ordinary creatures, just like in the modern world, very ordinary animals. Never mind the higher realms like the gods, Yao, and demons. Even in the lower realms like the heavenly palace and the underworld, all you could see were Yao and vicious beasts. Even those that hadn't taken human form possessed Yao's spiritual energy. But the creatures before him were so pure that he couldn't sense any spiritual energy at all. It was simply too shocking. Alliance Head Yi, Blue Blueprint patted Yizichin on the shoulder. Blue Blueprint guard. Yizichin turned around, coughed, and said, I don't think I can sense any Yao energy from the Yao here, but this is a small world our clan head and the old leader created. Blue Blueprint laughed and explained, his eyes brimming with undisguised reverence. The old leader wanted us to experience the lives of ordinary people in our free time, so we created this small world together. All living creatures here have no spiritual energy whatsoever. There is no spiritual power here, and no one can use spiritual power here. Created a small world? Yizichin's eyes flashed with shock. He instinctively tried to circulate his spiritual energy, only to realize that he really couldn't use it here. He couldn't even use the power of the stars. The Ancient Race. Chapter 1704. For some reason, Yizichin felt as if he were in the modern realm. Of course, this wasn't the feeling he got from the modern realm cities. Back in the modern realm, there were rows upon rows of skyscrapers, and the rumbling of cars filled the streets. It was vastly different from the peace and tranquility before him. This place was more like a simple village where people from the city came to relax. They walked away from the hustle and bustle of the city and experienced the tranquility of nature. Yizichin was shocked by the fact that this place had been created. Did that mean that the world he'd once lived in had been created as well? Half-step transcendence could create such a peaceful place? If it was like the planet he'd once lived on, could it have been created by transcendence as well? If that was the case, then the galaxy. Yizichin vaguely felt as if a brand new door was opening before him. However, his cultivation was still low, so his understanding of this wasn't as clear as that of a transcendent level cultivator. As a result, even though he felt like he was looking at a brand new world, it was still a blur. The guard smiled warmly. He wasn't surprised at all by Yizichin's shock. Everyone who came to visit the ancient realm was invited here. Once they sensed the uniqueness of this place and learned that it was a world created by the clan head and the previous clan head, no one could hide their emotions perfectly. The way Blueprint saw it, Yizichin's ability to control his emotions was pretty good. Quite a few people had been so shocked they couldn't even speak after arriving here. This place was like the first show of strength that the ancient race had shown to the outsiders. After that, they would bring the outsiders into the ancient race and witness the true strength of the ancient race. Fear would be deeply imprinted in their sea of consciousness, never to dissipate. Yizichin calculated the time. They'd stayed here long enough. At that moment, Lan Zhangwen reached out and patted Yizichin's shoulder, then politely took 2 steps back with a smile. Alliance Head Yi, let's not stay here for too long. The clan head has been waiting for us for quite some time now. As he spoke, the rustling sounds of wind could be heard from time to time in the forest. The wind carried with it the fragrance of flowers and grass. Hundreds of birds chirped on the trees, and fish swam freely in the rivers. This place was truly worthy of being called the secret realm of peach blossoms. Yizichin looked around longingly, as if he wanted to imprint everything here into his mind. After a while, Yizichin let out a deep sigh and said, "Don't worry. Blueprint Guard, please lead the way." No need. We're already in my house. I'll take you away." He could tell that Gu Luo Lin had been here many times before, so she was very familiar with the way out. She jogged all the way to an extremely ugly ancient tree with wide branches. Her fair little hand lightly patted the trunk of the ancient tree. Crash! A soft sound rang out in his ears. This sound was especially ear-piercing in this quiet space. Then, Yi Zichen looked behind the ancient tree. Cracks appeared in the surrounding space like a shattered mirror. The cracks continued to spread until the mirror completely shattered with a pa sound. From the crack in the mirror, one could see the mirage-like city that was shrouded in clouds and mist. Let's go. Gu Luo Lin jumped out of the crack with a giggle. Blueprint Guard didn't seem surprised by Gu Luo Lin's naughtiness. He didn't rush to follow her. This was the Gu clan's territory, and Gu Luo Lin was the only young lady of the direct line of descent. He didn't believe that anyone would dare to commit murder in the Gu clan's territory, nor was he worried that something would happen to Gu Luo Lin in the Gu clan's territory. This was the confidence that both the clansmen and servants of the Gu clan possessed. Just the two words Gu clan were enough to strike terror into the hearts of all demons. Alliance head Yi, let's go out as well. Blueprint gestured for Yi Zichen to leave. Yi Zichen nodded, then stepped out of the broken mirror. When he stepped out of the mirror, he discovered that the Peach Garden's secret realm they were in really was a subdimension. This space was perfectly fused with the Gu clan subdimension. Yi Zichen only needed to turn around to see the lush green trees within the broken mirror. You guys are so slow. Gu Luo Lin frowned and muttered as she stood on a cloud. Do we not need to worry about this place? Yi Zichen pointed at the broken mirror behind him. Blueprint laughed. The space here will heal itself. It won't be long before it closes up again. You can do that? As expected, as soon as Blueprint finished speaking, Yi Zichen vaguely saw the broken mirror begin to close up. Creating a subdimension was already the work of a major expert. Not only did they create space, they bestowed the laws of growth upon all living things, and then they could heal themselves. Of course, Alliance head Yi. Think about it carefully. Didn't the space of the upper three realms heal itself after shattering? The dimension our patriarch created is incomparable in size to the three realms of God, Yao, and Demon, but it is no different from the three realms of God, Yao, and Demon in every other way. His eyes gleamed with undisguised pride. This was the power of the Gu clan head, creating space, bestowing laws upon it, and healing itself. In the outside world, this was nothing short of a miracle. However, such a difficult task had been accomplished by their clan leader. Your clan head's abilities are truly unfathomable. Yi Zichen sighed in admiration from the bottom of his heart. The methods he just witnessed were absolutely miraculous. Never mind the emperors he was on good terms with. Even Zhou Wu, Kuei Lin, and the other emperors couldn't do this. Transcendence truly lived up to its name. Even if it was only a half step, it was enough to look down on all living things. Alliance head Yi, let's hurry into the city. If we're late, I'll inevitably be scolded by the clan head. Blueprint smiled amiably. His tone wasn't forceful, but rather pleading. Blueprint truly knew how to conduct himself. Regardless of whether his cultivation was higher than Yi Zichen's or the fact that he'd entered the ancient race and shown Yi Zichen their strength, his attitude hadn't changed in the slightest. Yi Zichen nodded and agreed to Blueprint's request, then continued onward. Only now did Yi Zichen understand. No wonder it was so blurry earlier. The capital seemed so close to the land of peach blossoms, but it was actually dozens of kilometers away. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, they reached the city gates. Above the city gate hung a huge signboard with the words Ancient Race, engraved in gold in bold and flamboyant calligraphy. Chapter 1705. Hey Lily, hurry up and take a look. A screen of water formed in front of Gu Xuanda. He couldn't help but wave at Qingli. The screen showed the scene outside the ancient race's capital. Yi Zichen appeared clearly on the screen, and even the expression on his face could be seen clearly. Qingli walked over and sat down, then looked at the screen. You're here. I just arrived. Gu Xuanda chuckled. Seeing his smile, Qingli felt that something was amiss. Did you do something? You really know me? Gu Xuanda's eyes flashed with excitement. He looked around suspiciously, then whispered into Qingli's ear. Qingli couldn't help but be stunned speechless. Isn't that a bit too much? How is it too much? I haven't even used my full strength yet. If he can't even enter the city, what right does he have to see us? Gu Xuanda said seriously, then smiled mischievously. Don't think so much. Hurry up and see how he's going to get in. Pressure. At some point, Yi Zichen's clothes were already drenched in sweat. He focused his gaze and walked forward with some difficulty. However, it was as if his legs were filled with lead, making it difficult for him to even take a step. When he looked at Gu Luolin and Blueprint, he saw that they'd already reached the city gates. They didn't seem affected by the word in the slightest. It seemed like the word only worked on outsiders. The heavy pressure washed over Yi Zichen like a tidal wave, causing him to tremble involuntarily. Strangely enough, the moment he lowered his head, the pressure would disappear, but when he raised his head, the pressure would crash into him like a tidal wave. What a great show of power! Do I have to lower my head if I want to enter the Gu race's city? Yi Zichen's eyes flashed with disdain. He didn't care how people entered the city, but no matter what, he wasn't going to lower his head to the Gu race. No matter what, he was the head of an alliance, and the Emperor Star of the Nirvana Stars. Yi Zichen lifted his leg and strode forward. The closer he got to the city, the stronger the pressure and the greater the resistance. Yi Zichen felt like his bones were about to shatter under the pressure. What's wrong with him? Gu Luolin, who was standing at the city gate, looked puzzled. Little did she know that Blueprint was also puzzled. In the past, the outsiders of the Aboriginals had never encountered such a situation when they entered the city. Just as he was feeling suspicious, a voice transmission suddenly appeared in his sea of knowledge. This telepathic message made Lan Xuanyu straighten his back, and his eyes were full of seriousness. However, at that very moment, Gu Luolin already wanted to go over to Yi Zichen's side to pick him up. Miss, the clan leader asked us to wait here for Alliance Leader Yi to come over. Gu Luolin opened her mouth, licked her lips, and stopped obediently. She wasn't afraid of anyone in the clan, but she was afraid of her father. It wasn't that her father was mean to her, it was just that her father always had a straight face. Ever since she could remember, she had never seen her father smile, so she had been especially afraid of her father since she was young. Gu Luolin didn't dare to step forward, so she could only watch Yi Zichen, who was struggling to walk forward. Under the pressure, Yi Zichen's eyes were bloodshot. He gritted his teeth, causing them to creak as large beads of sweat dripped down the tip of his nose and onto the ground. An entire hour passed. During that time, Yi Zichen hadn't even walked 50 meters. Interesting. Yi Zichen laughed angrily in his heart. He could feel that his body had already reached the limit of what it could bear. If he forced himself to walk forward, there was a 90% chance that the bones in his calves would shatter. If he lowered his head, he would be able to walk into the city without any resistance. But he was a tough nut to crack. You want me to lower my head? I won't. This pressure is coming from that stupid signboard, right? Then Laozi will destroy it. Suddenly, Yi Zichen retreated several meters. Instead of advancing, he retreated. Confusion flashed across Blueprint's and Gu Luolin's eyes. However, before they could think too much about it, a violent gust of wind howled from outside the city gates. The wind swept the earth, stirring up sand and gravel. 2 tornadoes soared into the sky, blowing away the clouds in the sky. The surging sandstorm caused people to subconsciously narrow their eyes into slits. Hey, that kid's getting impatient. Gu Xuanda clapped his hands and laughed when he saw Yi Zichen's rage through the water screen. He looked like a child who hadn't grown up yet. If Gu Luolin saw her normally unsmiling father act like that, he really didn't know what she'd think. He's got some skill. His use of the wind is comparable to Luolin's. Clan head, the Lord of the Big Dipper has arrived. An old woman entered the tower staircase. Gu Xuanda, who'd been laughing uncontrollably, instantly put away his smile. His unsmiling face involuntarily emanated an oppressive aura. Let her in. The old woman retreated. Before long, Yi Rong walked out of the staircase, dressed in plain clothes. Yi Rong greets clan uncle. Lil Rong, you're here. Sit. With every movement, Gu Xuanda's aura swirled around him. Although Yi Rong was the lord of the Big Dipper, Gu Xuanda's aura intimidated her quite a bit. She nodded slightly and took a seat at the stone table. Qingli, who sat next to Gu Xuanda, couldn't help but find it funny. Earlier, he'd been laughing like a child, but now he seemed more like a clan head. However, she also knew that Gu Xuanda only laughed like that when the two of them were together. Normally, he was the lofty clan head of the Gu clan. I called you here because your son is also with the Gu clan. You haven't seen each other in a long time, right? I wanted to use this opportunity to bring you and your son together. Zichen's here too, exclaimed Yi Rong. Before coming, Qingli hadn't told her he was coming, nor had he mentioned it to her. She'd come here because the Gu clan had summoned her. After telling Chao Feng, he didn't dare delay in the slightest and told her to go to the Gu clan as soon as possible. To her surprise, she'd come here because of her son. That's right. Look at that curtain of water. Isn't he right at the city gates? Qingli, on the other hand, always showed her truest personality. Although she was Yi Rong's elder, they were more like sisters. Seeing Yi Rong's astonishment, Qingli giggled and pointed at the curtain of water. Zichen, if I'm not mistaken, he's probably trying to destroy the city's signboard, chuckled Qingli. When Yi Rong heard that, her heart trembled. How could I do that? I'm going to capture that unfilial son right now. Clan uncle, please don't take offense. It's fine. Are you going to let him do it? But if he breaks the signboard, break it. Chapter 1706. A storm howled outside the city. Quite a few ancient clansmen and attendants sensed the commotion outside. Without exception, all of them put down whatever they were doing and hurried over to the city gates. They didn't sense even the slightest hint of seriousness in their eyes. They'd come purely to watch the show. Provoking the ancients? That didn't exist. For tens of millions of years, not a single person who'd caused trouble for the ancients had left standing. They didn't want to see just which idiot dared make a scene outside the city gates. Young lady, when they arrived at the city gates, they immediately saw Gu Luolin by Lan Jie's side. Countless clansmen and attendants rushed over to her, surrounding her like stars surrounding the moon. Young lady, you're finally back. The attendants grimaced. They'd been worried sick while Gu Luolin was gone. They'd practically turned the ancient race's subdimension upside down, especially Gu Luolin's two attendants. When they saw Gu Luolin standing outside the city gates, safe and sound, tears streamed down their faces. During this period of time, they had been living with fear and trepidation. The patriarch's beloved daughter had mysteriously disappeared, and the two maids were inextricably responsible for this. If something really did happen to Gu Luolin, the attendants hugged Gu Luolin and cried. Gu Luolin looked helpless. All she could do was pat the attendants' shoulders like a little adult, even though they were much older than she was. Your Excellency Lan Jie. The other clansmen greeted Lan Jie as well. In response, Lan Jie simply nodded, then focused on Yi Zichen. Your Excellency, where did this guy come from? Should we go over and teach him a lesson? Are you sure? Lan Jie's eyes flashed with a smile. This is an honored guest our clan head specifically requested to see. He's releasing a Dao here at the clan head's behest. Don't interfere. If you don't like him, then go up and fight him. The clan head instructed. The ancient race attendants all became listless. Even in the upper three realms, including the shamans, there weren't many people worthy of being treated as honored guests by the ancients. The young man in front of them was actually one of them. They were merely emissaries of the Gu clan and had nothing to do with the Gu clan. Even if they ate the heart of a bear and the guts of a leopard, they wouldn't dare to offend this lord. Since they weren't here to make a scene, these aboriginals and attendants stood by the city gate and watched quietly. Of course, they couldn't help but be curious in their hearts. In the past, all the distinguished guests were welcomed by several stewards of the clan, and they had never seen anyone brandishing their weapons before entering the city gates. Miss, that young man. Gu Luolin's two maids were also curious about Yi Zichen's identity. Hearing that, Gu Luolin chuckled. This is my eldest nephew. Nephew? The two maids were stunned. Gu Luolin was the youngest in the clan, and her nephew. Could it be the Lord of Seven Stars' son? Many people in the surroundings felt a chill in their hearts. There was no one who dared to stir up trouble. If there were no accidents, this person would be a direct descendant of the ancient race in the future. The Gu clansmen and attendants were astonished, but Yi Zichen had no idea. The only thought in his mind right now was to destroy this signboard. Heavenly fire. A wave of heat suddenly swept down from the void. The people in front of the city gate all felt that the surrounding temperature had risen a lot. The entire space was like a scorching furnace, with steaming hot air floating up from the ground to the void. Everyone in this space was sweating profusely on their faces and bodies. As they wiped their sweat, they saw that at some point, a blazing ball of fire had appeared above their heads. Inside the fireball was a scarlet word, and the flames were deep white. Despite the howling winds, the fireball didn't extinguish. Instead, it burned even brighter. The fire was fueled by the wind. That young man has comprehended the Tao of the five elements. The people in the city instantly realized what was going on. Ever since the five elements' great emperor perished and destroyed the Tao of the five elements, few people had comprehended the Tao of the five elements. Even in the ancient race, those who had comprehended the Tao of the five elements were few and far between. Most people only comprehended one or two of the five elements. For example, Gu Luolin had comprehended the Tao of the wind, but Yi Zichen had directly comprehended the great Tao of the five elements, and had even comprehended it to such a deep level. The ancient race didn't seem to have any. What's he trying to do? The blazing flames burned the people at the city gates in unbearable pain, but the fireball didn't descend. Instead, it borrowed the wind's momentum to make the flames burn even more fiercely. Fuse. At that moment, Yi Zichen's veins bulged, his eyes bloodshot. He reached into the air and clenched his fist. It was as if the wind and fire elements in the world had received his command, gathering towards the tornado and the fireball. That wasn't all. The two completely different elements seemed to be fusing. Gradually, the raging winds seemed to fuse with the fireball. They could clearly see the flow of the wind on the surface of the flames. Did he fuse the two elements together? How is that possible? Each of the five elements is independent. How could they fuse together? Is this youth's comprehension of the Tao of the five elements truly monstrous? Calling it the Tao of the five elements is a bit of an exaggeration, but his comprehension of the wind and fire elements is absolutely incomparable. Perhaps he's already reached the five elements' great emperor's level of comprehension. The five elements' great emperor? You're exaggerating a bit too much. The ancient clansmen outside the city gates discussed the matter fervently. To their surprise, the sky rumbled once more. The deafening roar of thunder filled the air. Everyone couldn't help but feel awe and veneration, but to their surprise, he wants to fuse lightning as well. This time, even Blueprint's eyes widened. Earlier, when he'd fused wind and fire, someone had said that Yi Zichen already had the five elements' great emperor's comprehension of the five elements. He'd snorted disdainfully at that. The five elements' great emperor used the five elements as his imperial title. His comprehension of the five elements was unfathomable. Otherwise, after his death, he couldn't have single-handedly destroyed the five elements. He'd stripped away all those who'd comprehended them. Yi Zichen's power of the five elements was indeed stunning, but compared to the five elements' great emperors, it was nothing. But now, the fusion of three elements. He was truly a monster. As the crowd watched in astonishment, Yi Zichen stared intently at the fireball, which had already fused with the wind and lightning. In truth, fusing three elements was something he'd come up with out of the blue. He'd tried fusing two elements before, but this was his first time doing it with three. As for what the final result would be, and what kind of power it would unleash, he didn't know. Chapter 1707. What great power! The ancient clansmen and attendants at the city gates gasped in shock as they watched the ball of wind and lightning merge into the sky. There were no weaklings among the ancients. Even if they were attendants of the ancients, they'd still be powerful existences in the outside world. These people were all very knowledgeable. Even though the fireball was not complete, they could still feel the terrifying power within it. None of the people at the city gates could guarantee that they'd be able to withstand such an attack. What exactly is this youth trying to do? Countless people had the same thought. They didn't know why Yi Zichen was condensing 3 fireballs. Fuse. Yi Zichen gnashed his teeth and clenched his right hand. 3 completely different types of energy slowly fused together as he grasped the air. Fierce winds surged around the blazing fireball, and thunder rumbled within it. The people at the city gates watched the fireball anxiously, waiting for Yi Zichen's next move. 10 minutes passed. After fusing the 3 fireballs, Yi Zichen finally moved. He leapt into the air like a nimble cat, covering 100 meters in a single leap. Stepping on the void, he slowly approached the fireball. This fireball, which was scorching hot and unbearable for the aboriginals, wasn't the slightest bit offensive to him. However, as he got closer, Yi Zichen discovered that the fusion of the 3 elements wasn't as perfect as he'd seen it from below. The 3 completely different elements clashed against each other, as if they were fighting for territory. From time to time, sparks would fly, but since the fireball surrounded them, the sparks were undetectable. At the same time, the 3 elements even seemed to be on the verge of breaking apart. When he saw this, Yi Zichen's gaze sharpened. A crown adorned with 5 elemental spiritual pearls appeared on his head, and he pressed down viciously with his right hand. All of you, behave yourselves. Only with the crown's intimidation and Yi Zichen's forceful suppression did the 3 elements settle down somewhat. I don't care how pissed you are right now, but you'd better be good and listen to me. So long as you can break that stupid city sign of yours, you can do whatever you want. As if they could understand Yi Zichen's words, the 3 fused elements simultaneously settled down. Unbeknownst to him, the Aboriginal experts at the city gate had their eyes wide open. Those who could remain in the ancient race were all Emperor-level experts, at the very least. Never mind the fact that Yi Zichen had suppressed his voice. They could even hear him clearly when he whispered. But what did they hear just now? Yi Zichen was going to destroy their city sign. Fusing 3 attributes, not bad. Inside the tower, Gu Xuanda sat on a chair and scoffed without a smile. At this moment, he seemed to be looking at this matter with the gaze of a senior looking at a junior. But in fact, he was already very happy in his heart. This little fellow is quite interesting. Fusing 3 attributes, your comprehension of the 5 elements is not bad. However, I'm afraid you're too naive if you think you can break this gift I left for you with just 3 attributes. Gu Xuanda could not stop laughing in his heart, but Yi Rong, who was also sitting in the same chair, looked rather worried. Uncle, why don't you let me go? It's fine. I also want to see just how strong our Gu family's Emperor Star is. It's just a city sign. If he can break it, then let him break it. Gu Xuanda waved his hand, but muttered in his heart. If he can break it, then I'll pluck my head off and let him kick it like a ball. If it was just a city sign, then he naturally wouldn't be so confident when he saw the fireball fused with 3 attributes. However, he'd already prepared a huge gift for Yi Zichen long before they arrived. This guy. Qingli couldn't help but shake her head. Gu Xuanda was her husband, so she knew exactly what he was thinking. Now, she was rather looking forward to Yi Zichen breaking the city sign. It'll be really interesting to see her husband's expression when he gets deflated. Lord Lonjian, he wants to break our city sign. The city sign is the pride of the ancient race. How can we let him trample it like that? How about we, the experts of the ancient race, all spoke up? At that moment, Lonjian's gaze was extremely solemn. He valued the dignity of the ancient race more than anyone else. Breaking the city sign was the same as slapping the ancient race in the face. He knew this better than anyone else. However, the clan head had warned him to let Yi Zichen attack. Clan head, I know you're watching. Suddenly, Yi Zichen looked up into the sky and shouted. Gu Xuanda, who was watching the city through a screen of water, froze, but his lips quickly curved into a smile. Ah, Within the ancient city, a gentle laughter rang out from within the city. The ancient race experts at the city gates were all kneeling on one knee. So you really are watching. I understand now. You're toying with me on purpose, aren't you? Said Yi Zichen. Lowering your head before entering the ancient race is a must. If you want to enter, you'll have to set aside your dignity. It's not just you. It's the same for anyone who comes to the ancient race, said the dignified voice from above. Interesting, sneered Yi Zichen. Yi Rong, who was watching through the screen of water, felt somewhat anxious. The person speaking to Yi Zichen was none other than the clan head of the ancient race, Gu Xuanda, who was half-step into the transcending realm. She was truly worried that Yi Zichen would anger Gu Xuanda. She tried to speak up several times, but Gu Xuanda had stopped her. I can also see your intentions. You want to break my signboard? That's right. Ha ha ha. A maniacal laugh echoed through the sky. Do you know that no one has ever broken my ancient city's plaque? If that's the case, then if I can break it. Yi Zichen's lips curved into a smile. Then he flung the fireball at the plaque with all his might. You'll be the number one in all of history. The scorching fireball swept up blades of wind and lightning as it whizzed through the air, tearing a pitch-black fissure in the surrounding subdimension. Countless ancient race experts were astonished. Since the founding of the ancient race, no matter who it was, they'd never been able to shake this subdimension in the slightest. Yet this fireball had torn such a long fissure in the subdimension. It was truly astonishing. Of course, they care more about their city plaque. If it broke, it would be a vicious slap in the face for all of them. Boom! The fireball accurately smashed against the signboard on the ancient city's gate. The instant the fireball collided with the signboard, a dazzling light exploded from the signboard. The dazzling light caused the surrounding people to be unable to open their eyes to look at it. The ancient race experts clenched their fists and prayed inwardly that the plaque wouldn't break. It wasn't that they didn't have confidence in their city plaque. It was just that the power of a 3-attribute fireball was simply too terrifying. Break! Yi Zichen pushed forward with his right hand. The fireball and the golden barrier of light clashed fiercely. At that moment, roar! A vigorous dragon roar abruptly erupted from the city's signboard, and the fireball that had fused 3 attributes directly swallowed the fireball. Chapter 1708. The triple elemental flames were swallowed up by the signboard. Gu Xuanda couldn't help but smile when he saw this. How could he remain so calm? It was all because of the pleasant surprise he'd left behind on the signboard. A vigorous dragon roar resounded, and Yi Rong, who was sitting on the platform of the tower, frowned. Yi Zichen had just released a triple elemental flame. Not even she dared say she could withstand such an attack head-on. Yi Zichen's growth was gratifying, but she was also curious as to why the Azure Dragon had swallowed all 3 types of attacks. Is that the soul of a holy dragon? Not long after, Yi Rong abruptly stood up from her chair. Most dragons were azure or red. Rarely were there golden or black dragons. However, there was an even rarer type of dragon, the holy dragon. Holy dragons were born with a sacred attribute and nourished by the 5 elements of heaven and earth. Only a few dragons of this attribute had been born during the era of the ancient dragon gods. That was the dragon race's golden age. At one point, they'd crushed the 9-tailed foxes. However, during the great war of gods and demons, the dragon race had suffered disastrous losses. When the dragon race fell, the souls of the holy dragons dispersed as well. Perhaps because the holy dragons were simply too heaven-defying, the dragon race hadn't given birth to another holy-type dragon in the past 10 million years. Few of the 3 races knew anything about the holy dragons. If it weren't for the fact that Yi Rong had inherited the Lord of 7 Stars legacy, she wouldn't have recognized the holy dragon's soul on the plaque. The holy dragon's attacks weren't the strongest. They couldn't compare to golden or black dragons. However, in a battle between people who used the power of the 5 elements, it was an invincible blade. When he saw Yi Rong's shocked expression, Gu Xuanda smiled and nodded. That's right, the soul of a holy dragon. At this moment, his face was filled with obvious arrogance. He looked at the battlefield on the water screen and glanced at Yi Rong. I obtained this holy dragon's soul by chance during my trip to the ancient battlefield of gods and demons. Unfortunately, it no longer had its own consciousness. It was just a remnant soul. I had no choice but to place it on the signboard. Your son does have some tricks up his sleeves. To be able to fuse 3 elements together, it can be said that he has outstanding talent among the 5 elements. Unfortunately, he ran into the divine dragon soul. I'm afraid it's impossible for him to destroy the city plaque. The dragon roared. A second ago, the Aboriginal experts at the city gate were still worried about the city plaque. In the next second, the surging collision annihilated everything. Then, a roaring dragon appeared at the city plaque. The azure dragon was less than 100 meters tall, which was considered small among the dragons. Its entire body was ashen white. It seemed both corporeal and incorporeal at the same time. As it coiled around the city's signboard, its eyes shone with an intimidating light as it stared at Yizichin, who stood in the air. Dragon soul. The ancient city's experts could tell that the azure dragon was a dragon soul. From the astonishment in their eyes, they knew that these ancient clan experts didn't know that there was a dragon soul hidden in the city plaque. How imposing. Up in the sky, the corners of Yizichin's lips curled up into a smile. He looked at the azure dragon's soul and murmured in admiration. Yizichin could tell that the plaque was a dragon soul, not a true dragon. Dragon souls were the most important heirlooms of the dragon race. All dead dragons would have their souls placed in the dragon race's secret realms so that they could rest in peace. The might of the dragon race couldn't be challenged. Anyone who harbored designs on the dragon race's soul, no matter how they used it, would be blasphemy against their dead clansmen. So long as the dragon race found out, they wouldn't rest until they were dead. The ancient race, they placed the dragon soul on the city plaque and treated it as the city's guardian. To put it bluntly, they were using the dragon soul to guard the gates. If any other clan dared do this, the dragon race would undoubtedly turn out in full force. The ancient race might have done this because they feared the ancient race and didn't dare touch them. Or perhaps the ancient race had done it in secret. The ancient race never appeared in the world, and anyone who left the ancient race didn't dare mention the ancient race in the slightest. As a result, the dragon race had no idea. Regardless of whether the dragon race knew or not, the ancient race had done it. Regardless of which possibility it was clear that the ancient race truly was the #1 race. Then he looked at the dragon soul on the city plaque. Yizichin hadn't anticipated that the plaque would be protected by the dragon soul. However, what surprised him even more was how the dragon soul had managed to devour the flames he'd fused with 3 different elements. Yizichin couldn't quite figure out the dragon soul situation, so he waved his hand and summoned a fireball, then a wind blade and a lightning bolt. He tossed them at the dragon soul. This fireball was very small. It was different from the triple elemental flames that seemed capable of destroying the heavens and extinguishing the earth. The ancient race experts at the city gates were also astonished. Why had Yizichin summoned a small fireball that even a supreme could block? Could it be that he'd used up all his spiritual energy while fusing 3 different elements? Of course not. Yizichin did this to see if the dragon soul could really devour the 5 elements he'd released. However, he noticed that the dragon soul didn't seem to have a mind of its own. It existed purely to protect the city plaque. Even when Yizichin attacked the signboard, it simply coiled around the signboard and roared. It didn't attack Yizichin in the slightest. It was very likely that the dragon soul's range of activity was the narrow space around the plaque. The dragon soul couldn't attack of its own accord, which gave Yizichin a bit more confidence. No matter how strong it was useless as a live target. A live target was great. Yizichin liked standing around and taking a beating. He didn't hesitate for long and summoned another pillar of water and ball of lightning. Without exception, when the 5 elements attacked the dragon soul, none of them caused any substantial damage. The dragon soul absorbed them all. For someone like Yizichin, who used the Tao of the 5 elements, this was absolutely not good news. Let's see what this little guy does this time, muttered Gu Xuanda to himself as he watched the water screen. Yizichin had been focused on comprehending the Tao of the 5 elements. The five elements couldn't harm the dragon soul at all. It could be said that Yi Zichen was practically crippled. However, at that very moment, Yi Zichen, who should have been in trouble, actually laughed. And he laughed in delight. This delight didn't seem fake. It was genuine joy that came from the bottom of his heart. Gu Xuanda instinctively furrowed his brows. Even now, Yi Zichen could still laugh. This was truly strange. Before long, the water screen appeared. Yi Zichen chuckled. Chapter 1709. Yi Zichen didn't know where Gu Xuanda was, so he could only speak into the air. Since that was the case, the ancient race experts could naturally hear him as well. When they heard about the soul of the holy dragon, they were stunned. They'd never heard of a holy dragon's soul. Most of the people at the city gates were servants and juniors of the ancient race. The true old antiques wouldn't come to watch the show like the youngsters. They'd all been born in the past 10,000 years, so it was normal that they didn't know about the holy dragon. However, Blueprint frowned deeply. He felt like he'd heard of the holy dragon before, but all of a sudden, holy dragon. Blueprint's eyes suddenly widened. He had always respected Gu Xuanda, and it was an honor for him to be able to become Gu Xuanda's guard. In order to keep up with Gu Xuanda, Blueprint spent his free time reading secret tomes. One of the ancient records mentioned the holy dragon of the Dragon Clan, but after the Great War of Gods and Demons, the Dragon Clan suffered a great loss, and no more holy dragons were born. Even golden dragons were very rare. As a result, the golden dragon became the symbol of the dragon race's highest status, and the holy dragon was gradually forgotten. Yet, Yi Zichen just said that the dragon soul on the signboard was the holy dragon soul. Not only that, Yi Zichen even said that he'd take it. The holy dragon soul was a treasure. How could he just take it? Clan head. Blueprint couldn't help but transmit with his divine sense. Before long, Gu Xuanda's reply appeared in his sea of consciousness. Tell him to take it. If he really has the ability, then so what if we give him the holy dragon's soul? Gu Xuanda snorted. Youngsters can be arrogant, but they have to know when to stop. Gu Xuanda was shocked by Yi Zichen's knowledge that he was able to see through the holy dragon's soul. However, trying to take away the dragon soul of the holy dragon would be the biggest joke in the world. He silently watched the scene on the water screen. He really wanted to see how Yi Zichen would take the holy dragon's soul. Hey! Yi Zichen licked his lips, his eyes flashing with greed. This was the holy dragon's soul, an existence that had gone extinct in the ancient times. Holy dragons fed on the five elements. It was rumored that they could ignore all elemental attacks in their later stages. If I can take it. To be honest, Yi Zichen really wanted to thank the old dragon god. If it weren't for the dragon race's secret tome, Yi Zichen really wouldn't have recognized the holy dragon. Previously, he had comprehended the dragon race's secret manual and condensed the Azure Dragon image. All he lacked was a dragon soul to give it spirituality. Dragon souls were treasures in the Dragon Clan. It was impossible to get one from the Dragon Clan. Now that there was such a cheap dragon soul in front of him, how could he face himself if he didn't take it? So long as Yi Zichen could devour it and feed it with the five elements, it wasn't impossible for the tattered dragon soul to regain a sliver of consciousness. At that time, when he fought against the Outerium god race, there would be the devil Dharma body in front of him and a shadow of the sacred dragon at the back. Wouldn't the Outerium god race have a terrible headache? Yi Zichen rubbed his palms together, while his right hand continuously pinched the corner of his shirt. Azure Dragon appears. Suddenly, Yi Zichen's gaze froze. With a deep roar, Yi Zichen's entire body radiated with golden light. The space behind him gradually distorted as a majestic Azure Dragon image appeared behind him. It had been a long time since he'd used the dragon race's secret tome, so he was somewhat rusty. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the Azure Dragon image behind Yi Zichen fully formed. Although it was only an image, it seemed more real than real. Whether it was its dragon patterns, scales, or whiskers, they all looked as if they'd been meticulously carved by a craftsman. Its bright, piercing eyes made it look like an emperor surveying his surroundings. His draconic might disdainfully overlooked all life. Roar! A resonant dragon's roar erupted from behind Yi Zichen, stirring up fierce gales that rippled through the air like ripples in water. The Dragon City experts couldn't help but shield their ears with divine power. They couldn't help but feel fear and didn't dare meet the Azure Dragon's gaze. This draconic might. Outside the city gates, Lonwyn was astonished. He'd seen quite a few dragons, and he'd fought quite a few of them. However, in terms of draconic might, none of the dragon experts Lonwyn had encountered, not even the head of the dragon race, could compare to this Azure Dragon in the slightest. When the Azure Dragon appeared, the sacred dragon's soul fell silent. Just a moment ago, it had been roaring incessantly. Now, it curled up into a ball and whimpered. "The sacred dragon's soul is afraid," shouted the ancient race experts. In response, Yi Zichen simply smiled indifferently. It was right to be afraid. The dragon race's secret scriptures had been passed down since ancient times. Not even the current Yao race had any records of them. If it weren't for the dragon god, the secret scriptures would have disappeared long ago. Although the current dragon race was a powerful race, they were still far inferior to the dragon race's golden age. Furthermore, Yi Zichen had received the dragon god's true inheritance. Although the dragon image behind him was the image of an azure dragon, even the dragon god had gasped in admiration. This azure dragon was clearly no ordinary dragon. Besides, in the primordial era, a true war dragon was an azure dragon. As soon as the azure dragon's image appeared, the sacred dragon soul was no longer as domineering as before. It whimpered, not daring to meet the azure dragon's gaze. In response, Yi Zichen simply smiled, then strode towards the city's signboard. When it sensed the azure dragon's draconic might approaching, the sacred dragon soul dove directly into the signboard and refused to come out. "Hide? You think you can hide?" As the ancient race experts watched, Yi Zichen clenched his fist and raised it high. The azure dragon behind him raised its right wing as well. As Yi Zichen's fist descended, the azure dragon's wings slammed into the signboard. Boom! Yi Zichen's right fist smashed into the signboard. This time, the sacred dragon soul didn't appear to resist in the face of the azure dragon's might. Without the blessing of the holy dragon, the wings of the blue dragon landed on the signboard with a loud crash. The signboard with the words "Ancient City" written in gold inscribed on it suddenly had a crack. The crack grew wider and wider. Before long, the signboard shattered in half and fell to the ground. The ancient race experts were dumbfounded. Their city signboard, their pride, had been trampled on. Countless ancients' eyes went bloodshot. They wanted nothing more than to rush up and kill Yi Zichen, the bastard who'd broken their signboard. The blueprint instantly formed a barrier around them, trapping the Gu clansmen under the city gate. "Your Excellency, blueprint. Without the clan head's orders, no one is allowed to touch him." As he said this, Blueprint's eyes were bloodshot. He was more upset than anyone else that the signboard had been broken, but as Gu Xuanda's bodyguard, he had to follow his orders. This blueprint definitely isn't an emperor. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes at the situation below. He could sense the barrier forming below. To be able to do this in the blink of an eye, there was no way he was an emperor. Chapter 17:10. The city sign shattered. Countless Gu clan experts were furious. Gu Luolin covered her mouth in shock. She'd never imagined that her family's city sign would be smashed. However, there was also a hint of excitement in her shocked eyes. So cool. She clenched her fists and couldn't help but mutter. The maids beside her immediately looked in her direction. "Miss, what did you just say?" "I didn't say anything." Gu Luolin giggled. In truth, it wasn't just the maids. Quite a few nearby experts heard her as well. However, they treated it as a hallucination. No matter what, Gu Luolin was a direct descendant of the Gu clan. How could she possibly say something like that after the city sign was broken? That's so cool. My eldest nephew has done what I wanted to do, but didn't dare to do in the past. He's really my eldest nephew. Gu Luolin couldn't help but nod inwardly as she looked at the broken city sign. At that moment, above the city gates, the divine dragon's soul was attached to the city sign. Now that the sign was broken, its residence was destroyed as well. It naturally appeared before Yi Zichen's eyes. When it sensed the dragons might approach, The divine dragon's soul cried out in pain and tried to retreat. Perhaps Gushwanda had placed it near the city sign to restrict it. Gushwanda had wanted to use the divine dragon's soul to scare Yi Zichen and restrict it to the city sign. That way, the Gu clan would seem domineering. The divine dragon's soul guarding the gates was indeed domineering. However, Gushwanda never would have guessed that Yi Zichen would do something like that. He'd basically shot himself in the foot. Still want to run? Where do you think you're going at a time like this? When the city sign shattered, the pressure that had made it difficult for Yi Zichen to even move dissipated. Yi Zichen walked in front of the divine dragon's soul and gently reached out to touch it. The divine dragon's soul curled up in fright and didn't dare resist. It simply let Yi Zichen touch it and let out occasional cries of pain. What are you doing? You'll definitely have a much better future with me than guarding the gates. Sensing the divine dragon's fear, Yi Zichen retracted his hand. I believe that you must still have a trace of consciousness. Otherwise, you wouldn't have reacted in fear after sensing my dragon's might. Follow me and fuse with the Azure Dragon behind me. In the future, you can have as many elements as you like. What do you think? To his surprise, Yi Zichen didn't take a hard stance. Instead, he negotiated with the divine dragon's soul. During their discussion, Yi Zichen intentionally retracted his draconic might to make the holy dragon's soul feel better. You should be the remnant soul of the ancient holy dragon. You've fallen to this state because of the demon race and the god race. I won't deal with them. In the future, I'll definitely fight against the devil race and the god race. Come to me, and I'll avenge you. How about it? What kind of future does guarding the door have? Even if the Gu family's patriarch is a half-step transcendent expert, he is still just a half-step transcendent expert. I am this era's Emperor Star-Lord. In the future, I will be able to transcend. Not half-step, but directly transcend. Won't you have a better future following a transcending realm expert than a half-step transcending realm expert? The Holy Dragon's soul clearly had a sliver of consciousness. Yi Zichen was certain of that. Otherwise, when the Azure Dragon appeared behind Yi Zichen, it wouldn't have reacted in fear. Instead, it glared at him in a daze. In that case, it should be able to understand what Yi Zichen was saying, but it didn't react at all. Could it be that what he said wasn't to its liking? Maybe you should try another way? Yi Zichen muttered to himself for a moment, then glanced at the illusory Azure Dragon behind him. Although Yi Zichen had intentionally retracted his draconic might, the Azure Dragon's gaze alone was enough to deter the Holy Dragon's soul. The Holy Dragon was afraid of the illusory Azure Dragon. Could it? How about this? Follow me, and I'll take you to the Dragon God. Roar. The curled-up Holy Dragon's soul suddenly let out a roar. This roar wasn't like the previous ones, which were filled with hostility. Instead, it was tinged with excitement. Seeing this, Yi Zichen was delighted. It seemed the Holy Dragon used to follow the Dragon God. The strand of consciousness it had left behind was directed at the Dragon God. That was why Yi Zichen, who had been personally taught the dragon race's secret scriptures by the old Dragon God, was so fearful. I'm excited about it. Brother, this phantom of mine is the secret manual of the Dragon Clan. You can feel it, right? The dragon's soul nodded like a human. Seeing this, Yi Zichen was overjoyed. Then you should also know that the dragon race's secret tome is in the hands of the Dragon God. Since I was able to condense this Azure Dragon image, I naturally met the old Dragon God before. I won't beat around the bush with you. Actually, this phantom of mine was personally taught to me by the old Dragon God. I can be considered a disciple of the old Dragon God. Roar. The Holy Dragon's soul roared again. It was clearly in draconic language. Yi Zichen meant. He didn't understand. However, he was sure that the divine dragon soul didn't have any objections to him. He had already mentioned the old Dragon God. Furthermore, he was an inner disciple. If this holy dragon was the old Dragon God's subordinate, he would definitely listen to him. I don't understand what you're saying. Although the old Dragon God took me in, the old Dragon God spoke to me in human language. You understand human language, right? It's the language I speak. I don't understand your dragon language, but I can promise you that as long as you follow me, I will definitely take you to see the old Dragon God. What's more, I have a good relationship with you dragons. Your dragon princess is a golden dragon. That's my wife. Wife, do you understand what I mean? Roar. What the hell is he talking about? Yizichin couldn't help but mutter to himself. Since the holy dragon can't speak, it's really hard to communicate with him. However, the holy dragon soul's emotions seem to be friendly. Since that's the case, then there's nothing else to say. I'll just directly pull him in. Look, I have such a good relationship with you dragons. The dragon princess is my wife, and your old dragon god is my master. What are you waiting for? Follow me. Stop guarding the door. Dragons have their own pride. Guarding the door is something a dog should do. Achoo. Lil White rubbed his nose. Who's missing me? How about it? Are you following me or not? With that, Yizichin did not say anything else. He merely stared at the holy dragon's soul. He was the great hoodwinker. He had said everything he could. The holy dragon's soul hesitated for a moment. Roar. It let out another loud roar, then snuck back into Yizichin's sleeves. Not long later, the mirage of the dragon behind Yizichin seemed to solidify. A hint of intelligence appeared in its eyes as it flapped its wings and roared. Ha! Yizichin couldn't help but feel excited with the addition of the holy dragon's soul. Bro, rest well. I can't maintain the mirage of the holy dragon for long. I'll take you to see the old dragon god in a few days. Roar! The holy dragon roared. Yizichin smiled, then retracted the dragon. Chapter 17:11. Within the tower, Yizichin's arrogant laughter rang out from within the water screen. But when Yi Rong heard it, her heart skipped a beat. Gushwanda didn't show any of his emotions on his face. He simply waved his hand and dispersed the water screen. Clan uncle, Yi Rong was rather worried for him. The divine dragon was a precious item, but he'd taken it away. That wasn't too bad. She could just have Yizichin return it. The most important thing was the city sign. The sign was the pride of the Gu clan, yet Yizichin had destroyed it. This infuriated the experts of the Gu clan even more. Yizichin, this child, is too impudent. Yi Rong cursed in a testing manner. Hearing that, Qingli patted Yi Rong's hand. You can't blame him. Xuanda already said that it's his ability to destroy the sign, and it's also his ability to take the divine dragon away. Since he did it with his own ability, why blame him? Lil Rong, you really gave birth to a child, unlike that girl of mine. She's still like a child. Ani, all right, don't worry. Xuanda isn't a petty person. He's the head of the Gu clan. He's a man of his word. He definitely won't blame Yizichin, and will even reward him. Qingli smiled, then looked towards Gu Xuanda. Right, Xuanda? Yes. Reward, and reward him handsomely. Gu Xuanda nodded benevolently. Qingli had already burst into laughter. She'd known Gu Xuanda for so long, but she'd never seen him suffer so much. The city sign was destroyed, and the divine dragon's soul that he'd obtained with great difficulty was stolen. She knew the origins of the divine dragon's soul. Gu Xuanda had indeed obtained it in the ancient battlefield, but it wasn't as easy as he'd said. In order to condense such a soul, Gu Xuanda stayed in the ancient battlefield for 100 years. He condensed the remnant souls bit by bit, and only then did such a holy dragon's soul appear. He'd treated the divine dragon's soul like a treasure, and had only recently placed it on the city sign. He wanted to use the divine dragon's soul to scare Yizichin because he knew he was proficient in the Tao of the 5 elements. Who would have thought? See, since Xuanda said so, don't worry. Instead of comforting Gu Xuanda, Qingli looked at Yi Rong with a smile. Yi Rong couldn't help but be confused by the scene in front of her. She felt that the problem wasn't that simple. However, these two were half-step Transcendence Realm experts and were her seniors. She didn't think too much about it. All he could do was nod repeatedly, praise Gu Xuanda's kindness, and thank him on Yizichin's behalf. There was no response from Gu Xuanda. Yizichin really wanted to hear Gu Xuanda's exasperated curses. Being able to infuriate a half-step transcendent level cultivator was pretty cool. Unfortunately, Gu Xuanda did not respond. Yizichin could only twitch his mouth in disappointment, then land beside Blueprint. Blueprint Guard, please lead the way. Yizichin didn't forget his purpose in coming here. The Gu clan head wanted to see him. Breaking the city plaque and seizing the holy soul was just a small interlude in entering the city. Now that the city plaque no longer exerted any pressure on him, he naturally wanted to enter the city to see the half-step transcending realm expert who had suffered a great loss. However, as soon as he landed, Yi Zichen felt countless powerful auras lock onto him. Yi Zichen's heart skipped a beat. Even the weakest of these auras were emperors, and there were quite a few monarchs among them. This Gu clan, with 3 half-step transcendence realm experts, Yi Zichen couldn't underestimate them. However, everyone from his clansmen to his attendants were all emperor-level experts. This was way too terrifying. Yi Zichen looked around and saw that practically every one of the city gates was staring at him. It seemed they were all furious that Yi Zichen had broken their city plaque. Yi Zichen, who'd just been joking with the Gu clan head, gulped despite himself. Gu Xuanda was his senior. Yi Zichen trusted that he wouldn't bicker with a junior like him. However, the Gu clan experts before him might not be as magnanimous as Gu Xuanda. There were so many emperors and monarchs. If they really attacked, Yi Zichen wouldn't be able to survive even if he had 10 lives. Brat, you dared to break Gu Xuanda's city plaque. Suddenly, a burly man appeared at the city gates. He clenched his fists and charged at Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen instinctively activated the power of the 5 elements, but Blueprint acted first. With a wave of his hand, he slapped the Imperial Emperor back. Alliance head Yi is the clan head's honored guest. How dare you? Lord Blueprint. The burly man who was pushed back clutched his chest and roared with unwillingness in his heart. He broke our city gate's signboard and said those words, disrespecting our clan leader. The clan head didn't hold it against you. You don't need a win face for the Gu clan. Blueprint narrowed his eyes and looked around angrily. Just now, I took pity on you all for protecting the clan. If anyone dares to disrespect Alliance head Yi in the slightest, don't blame me for being merciless. It was obvious that Blueprint held great prestige within the Gu clan. Or perhaps it was more accurate to say that his cultivation was enough to crush everyone at the city gates. As soon as he said that, the people who'd previously held a grudge against Yi Zichen couldn't help but lower their heads. However, there were still quite a few among them who didn't avert their gazes and snorted angrily. Lord Blueprint, breaking the Gu clan city gates is a slap in the face. No one has ever dared provoke us like this in tens of thousands of years. Since he's the clan head's honored guest, he should treat the Gu clan with even more respect. He shouldn't have broken our city plaque and insulted the clan head. I didn't receive the clan head's transmission. I don't know if Lord Blueprint's words are true or not, but here, this person who broke our city gate plaque must pay for his mistake with his blood. Huh, are you saying you want to try me? Suddenly, Blueprint's body glowed with a deep blue light. Countless cyclones rose from beneath his feet, and a heavy, mountainous pressure enveloped everyone's hearts. Quite a few emperors retreated 10,000 meters. They didn't dare stay under the emperor's pressure for long. That's exactly what I was thinking. The person who'd spoken earlier snorted and stepped forward. Perfect timing. I want to see if Lord Blueprint really has the right to be the clan head's personal guard. Lord Baisho, he's here too. When they saw who'd stepped forward, the crowd grew restless. Last time, Lord Baisho lost to Lord Blueprint in a martial arts duel. He never became the clan head's personal guard. It seems he's always been dissatisfied, so he's purposefully causing trouble for Lord Blueprint. Lord Baisho's been in the ancient battlefield all these years. I wonder if Lord Blueprint is his match. I support Lord Baisho. That brat really went too far. He should be taught a lesson. Yi Zichen couldn't help but be stunned when he saw Blueprint and Baisho clashing head-on. What's going on? Chapter 17:12. The lights flickered alternately. Blueprint's body was emitting a deep blue brilliance, while Baisho, who was standing opposite him, was emitting a blood-red light. The alternating brilliance of these two colors was dazzling to behold. Emperor, when they truly released their auras, Yi Zichen sensed their cultivations. They were all in the Emperor realm, in the outside world. An Emperor realm expert was already an Emperor of a realm. In the God, Yao, and Demon races, only the God Emperor, the Demon Emperor, and the Fey Emperor had reached this realm. In the ancient race, they hadn't even entered the city, but they had already seen them. Of course, this was also because Yi Zichen had broken the city's sign. Quite a few experts had come to watch. Even so, the appearance of two emperors was still somewhat shocking. The ancient race was indeed worthy of their name. Sigh, those two are fighting again. Gu Luolin shook her head with a sigh. While the two of them were at loggerheads, Gu Luolin spread her wings and brought Yi Zichen to a safe location. She shook her head and sighed as she looked at the blueprint and the fact that she couldn't keep it. Do they fight often? That's right. As long as Baisho returns from outside, he will definitely find blueprint for a fight. These two actually don't have any grudges. They just want to be my father's bodyguards. Tell me, what's so good about being my bodyguard? He's always pulling a long face, as if someone owes him money, Gu Luolin muttered. But the two of them remind me of an anime. Anime? Gu Luolin blinked. Dragon Ball Super? Yi Zichen's gaze instantly tensed up as he looked at Gu Luolin speechlessly. Anime and manga were products of the modern world and did not exist in this upper plane. How did she know about Dragon Ball Super? All of a sudden, Yi Zichen recalled that the ancient texts Gu Luolin had mentioned were actually wuxia novels. What? Did I say something wrong? Gu Luolin pointed at the blueprint and Baisho. Aren't these two super scions? Key explosion? 100 guards exploded with pink key, and blueprint exploded with blue key. According to Dragon Ball Super's explosive level, blueprint has lost. What a ghost. This was clearly a creation of the modern realm. How did Gu Luolin know so much about it? The Aboriginals not only read wuxia and fantasy novels, but they also watched cartoons. Where did you learn all this? Asked Yi Zichen. I already have them at home. When I was young, I liked to see them. It's just that when I grew up, my father wouldn't let me see them. Gu Luolin said with some regret on her face. When I was young, my father accompanied me to watch it every day. He always told me that in the future, he would be like a super scion and smash a planet with one punch. At that time, it's good to serve Daddy. When I grow up, I know that Daddy always keeps a straight face and doesn't say anything. Did your father ever say how these came about? I heard that he recorded it when he was traveling in outer space. I recorded it. Yi Zichen's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets, and his mouth opened so wide that an egg could fit inside. What did Gu Luolin say? Recorded. Dragon Ball Super was recorded by Gu Xuanda when he was traveling in outer space. Yeah, Gu Luolin nodded and said, my father said that he couldn't beat those people at that time. However, my father was good at hiding, so he hid beside them and recorded it. When he came back, he studied it himself and figured out how to beat them. Stop joking. Yi Zichen's expression froze to the point of no return. Dragon Ball Super was clearly an extension of Dragon Ball. An anime was just an anime. Why did Gu Luolin, or perhaps Gu Xuanda, make it sound like a recording? It was real. One Kaioken could shatter a planet. One Kamehameha could destroy several planets. How could this be real? If people like that really existed, wouldn't they be annihilated in the blink of an eye if they wanted to attack the Milky Way? Suddenly, Yi Zichen thought of the supreme treasure and Fairy Zixia. In the modern realm, Journey to the West was nothing more than a moving, emotional movie. Countless people wept over it. But after spending some time with the great sage, Yi Zichen realized that Fairy Zixia was real, and so was the supreme treasure. Their story was even more real. Was it possible that Dragon Ball Super? Impossible. As soon as this thought popped into his head, Yi Zichen suppressed it. He still hadn't figured out what the outsiders were up to. If people from Dragon Ball Super really existed, then what was the point of playing around? In a battle between experts, accumulating power was extremely important. Blueprint and Baisho exploded in front of the city gates for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. They looked at each other, but neither made a rash move. I heard you gained a lot from the ancient battlefield. Blueprint's hair stood on end, and the air around him swirled wildly. He smiled at Baisho. I gain a lot, snorted Baisho. You say that every time, but in the end, you're still no match for me. Don't you get tired of being like this? In truth, you're already very strong, said Blueprint. If I can't defeat you, how can I be considered strong? Then make your move. Let me see just how much you've improved lately. As soon as Blueprint said that, Bai Shou, who was covered in pink energy, stomped the ground. The ground beneath his feet caved in, and a storm of dust rose up, making it impossible to see what was going on inside. The people standing in the air could only see the blue and pink chi constantly changing positions. Through the spatial collisions between the two, they could tell what was going on. It really is a bit like Dragon Ball Super. Yi Zichen stood in the sky and looked down. This sort of high-frequency fight was extremely similar to the fights in Dragon Ball Super. They fought from the south to the north, then from the north to the west. The explosive Blueprint and 100 guards kept colliding back and forth. Because the two of them were fighting so fast, no one knew to what extent they were fighting. Boom! With another loud sound, Blueprint and Bai Shou separated. Both of them were more or less injured, but upon closer inspection, Bai Shou's injuries were more serious. It seems like I can't hide my trump card anymore. Bai Shou wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and squinted his eyes. This is a battle technique I comprehended in the ancient battlefield. If you can block it, then I won't cause trouble for you for the rest of my life. Please don't be stingy with your teachings. Blueprint reached out his hand with a smile, looking rather chivalrous. Bai Shou bent down slightly and placed his hands on his stomach. F***CK, Kamehameha Qigong. Yi Zichen couldn't help but shout. Bai Shou, who was accumulating energy, turned around and glanced at Yi Zichen. Young hero, you have good eyesight. As expected of the clan head's esteemed guest. F***CK, it really is. But didn't I comprehend this Kamehameha Qigong myself? I'm not curious why Yi Zichen could call out the name of the technique I comprehended. Chapter 17:13. The more I look at him, the more he looks like him. Bai Shou stood in the air with his hands on his abdomen and bent over. Sure enough, a pure white ball of light appeared where his palms met. The ancient race truly was a place full of surprises. Everyone in the race was an emperor-level expert. Even rulers didn't have much of an influence here. The holy dragon soul, which hadn't been seen for tens of millions of years, had also appeared. Now, 2 more super scions with explosive energy had arrived. Among them, the one with explosive energy could use Kamehameha. Yi Zichen was waiting for Bai Shou to use Kamehameha. He wanted to see if his Kamehameha was as fierce as Wukong's. Blueprint also sensed the threat of Kamehameha. The blue energy around him grew even more violent. If you can use World King Fist on me, then I'll submit to the ancient race. Yi Zichen muttered to himself. Since it had already happened, and the Kamehameha that shouldn't have appeared, Yi Zichen decided to just accept it and continue to watch in anticipation. Stop! An imposing voice suddenly sounded out from within the city. If Yi Zichen wasn't mistaken, it was the ancient race's head, Gushwanda. Bai Shou instantly dispersed the Kamehameha in his hands. The two of them also withdrew their super scion energy back into their bodies. Blueprint, bring people to the tower. Understood. Blueprint cupped his fist and bowed towards the city, then instantly appeared in front of Yi Zichen and made an inviting gesture. The clan head invites you in. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel that it was a pity that he didn't get to see Kamehameha. Yi Zichen pursed his lips, then glanced at Bai Shou. Bro, I feel like if you use it, then you'll probably win. Young hero, you truly have good eyes. If you let me go all out, then given Blueprint's level, it'll be very difficult for him to defend against my attack. Bai Shou beamed with joy at Yi Zichen's praise. If you don't accept it, then we'll fight again. Blueprint snorted coldly, then looked at Yi Zichen with a gaze that was no longer as friendly as before. Blueprint and Bai Shou were old rivals. He admitted that Bai Shou's Kamehameha was a bit of a threat, but he was rather displeased that someone said he couldn't beat guard. Hey, if you know Kaioken, I'll bet on you winning. Yi Zichen chuckled, while confusion flashed across Lan Jianba's eyes. It seems like he doesn't know about the existence of Realm King Fist. When Yi Zichen noticed the change in his gaze, he let out a disappointed sigh. He had thought that he would be able to watch a world war between Dragon Ball Super and the Aboriginals, but this Blueprint was really disappointing. He did not even know how to use Kaioken. Under the guidance of the blueprint, Yi Zichen and Gu Luolin entered the city. As he entered the city, Yi Zichen sensed quite a few ancient clansmen's resentment towards him. From time to time, their auras would sweep past him, suppressing him somewhat. Blueprint saw all of this, but did not stop them. If it wasn't for the fact that the clan head forbade him from harming Yi Zichen, he would have been the first to fight Yi Zichen. This little fellow is really troublesome. Gu Xuanda, who had chased away the blueprint and the 100 guards, pursed his lips and smiled. His expression was like that of a senior looking at a naughty junior. However, Qingli, who was familiar with Yi Zichen, knew that her husband was furious. It seemed like she had to pay more attention to Yi Zichen and Gu Xuanda. If her husband was truly angry, she could warn him in advance in case he really hurt Yi Zichen. How imposing! The ancient city was filled with row upon row of skyscrapers. When Yi Zichen entered, he actually had the illusion that he was in a metropolis of the modern realm. The skyscrapers reached into the clouds, the streets were smooth, and there was even vegetation on both sides of the streets. If there were more cars on the streets, it really would look like a small town. Alliance Head Yi, this way please. Lan Jianba gestured for Yi Zichen to follow. What appeared in front of him was a towering tower that pierced the clouds. Yi Zichen had noticed it even before entering the city. When he was breaking the city plaque, he had noticed this tower. The tower was truly tall. Yi Zichen hadn't even been able to see its end when he stepped into the sky. Could it be that he had to walk up to such a tall tower? The answer was naturally no. What's more, the means of transportation they were on drove Yi Zichen mad. An elevator. There was actually an elevator here. Gu Luolin, did you have this since you were born? Yi Zichen couldn't help but ask after they entered the elevator. To be honest, Yi Zichen felt that his mental fortitude was pretty strong. However, after arriving at the ancient race, he was constantly being bombarded. In order to solve his problems, Gu Luolin and his teacher desperately answered all sorts of questions for him. Yeah, it's always been here. You've never seen it before, right? It called an elevator. Gu Luolin said proudly. My father extracted the power of lightning from the heavens and connected it to the elevator, turning it into a perpetual state of motion. F*CK, they even called it the same thing. Extracting the power of lightning from the heavens really was something. These clearly belonged to the modern realm, yet they had all appeared in the ancient race. Outside, there were rows upon rows of skyscrapers. Gu Luolin had read anime and wuxia fantasy novels. This place was practically half the modern realm. It was just like the first era in the outside. It was exactly the same as the modern realm. Yi Zichen truly had the urge to grab Gu Xuanda by the neck when he saw him and ask him why something from the modern realm had appeared here. Was it because he had gone to the modern realm in advance? Or perhaps it was more accurate to say that the modern realm had already been unfrozen. He had gone to the modern realm to steal this technology. The former was fine, but if it was the latter, the modern realm had already been unfrozen. Even if he went back now, would it still be the same world as before? Ding dong. The elevator doors opened. Blue Blueprint continued to lead the way. After passing through several corridors, they arrived at a vast platform shrouded in mist. Yi Zichen saw 3 figures with their backs to him. Clan head, Alliance head Yi is here. Go down. That was the voice. The person who spoke was the one Yi Zichen had spoken with earlier. Yi Zichen locked his gaze on the figure with his back to him, then walked forward slowly, rolling up his sleeves. He was going all out. Even if Gu Xuanda was half step away from transcending, he had to get to the bottom of this. Just as he was about to reach out and grab Gu Xuanda's neck, Zichen, don't be rude. A familiar, gentle, yet slightly stern voice sounded out beside Yi Zichen's ear. When he turned around, he saw Yi Rong looking at him angrily. Chapter 17:14. Yi Zichen was the ruler of several sacred lands of the God and Yao realms, and had millions of troops under his command. The only person he feared in this world was his mother, Yi Rong, who stood before him. Back in the God Emperor's tomb, Gu Luolin had mentioned her relationship with Yi Rong. At the time, Yi Zichen hadn't completely disbelieved her. He knew full well that his surname was Gu, and since he'd met Gu Zichin, he knew a bit about what had happened in Gu Zichin's realm. However, the difference between the modern realm's Gu family and the god realm's Gu family was simply too vast. It was hard to connect the two together. Now, Yi Rong had appeared in the Gu family. It seemed she'd confirmed the fact that he was a member of the Gu family. Big sister Yi Rong. Gu Luolin giggled as she ran to Yi Rong's side. From the looks of it, her relationship with Yi Rong was very close, perhaps even more than that of her parents. Luolin's here too. Gu Luolin gently patted her on the head, then nodded and smiled. Can't you see that your mother and father are here too? On the platform of the high tower, a low voice that was not particularly gentle could be heard. The smile on Gu Luolin's face, who had been smiling just a moment ago, suddenly disappeared. There was some nervousness and fear in her eyes as she looked over. Damn, you left the family subdimension without my permission and risked your life to go to the God Emperor's tomb. You even risked your life to enter the God Emperor's tomb. I really don't know if you still see me as your father. Gu Xuanda's tone grew harsher and harsher. He'd been in a high position for so long, his body involuntarily emanated an oppressive aura. The temperature on the platform plummeted and the air pressure rose. Gu Luolin, who stood behind him, could only hang her head. She was no longer as lively and playful as before. Instead, she bit her lip in fear. I know I was wrong. All right. Luolin just got tired of staying in the clan and wanted to go out and see. Why did she have to be so angry? A gentle whisper and a blurry shadow appeared in the clouds. From the figure, Gu Xuanda could see her bend down and gently rub Gu Luolin's face. Then, her gentle voice rang out from the platform once more. It's good that Luolin's back safely. Next time you go out, you have to tell Mom, or I'll be really worried. It's good that you're fine. Go back to your room and play by yourself. Mom and I have some business to discuss with your big sister Rong and her son, Yi Zichin. Gu Luolin didn't want to stay a second longer. Her father always had a dark expression on his face when he saw her. She felt uncomfortable standing with him. Since Qingli had asked her to leave, she would definitely not stay any longer. After taking a few steps toward the gate of the tower, Gulin suddenly stopped. Mother, I have something to do. Can we talk about it after I'm done? Qingli smiled warmly. Gu Luolin nodded, then disappeared into the clouds. Gu Xuanda, who was still sitting with his back towards Yi Zichin, couldn't help but snort coldly. Yi Zichin squinted at his surroundings, then saw a woman walk out of the clouds. The woman was wearing a green silk dress, and from her appearance, she looked to be around 20 years old. Yi Zichin couldn't help but be stunned the moment he laid eyes on her. Yi Zichin had seen his fair share of breathtakingly beautiful women. So Mo, Xia Kiki, and Su Yan were all devastatingly beautiful. However, the woman in front of him was different. It was as if she had walked out of a painting. Her every movement seemed to exude the aura of a fairy. Her skin was smooth, her eyebrows were seductive, and her long, black hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. Anyone who saw her would feel their heart skip a beat. However, her seductive eyes also contained a coldness that no one dared to look directly at. You must be Lil Rong's child, Gu Luolin smiled. Yi Zichin felt very uncomfortable being called a child by such a young and beautiful woman, and her calling his mother Lil Rong. However, even if he felt uncomfortable, he didn't dare to act rashly, because he knew very well that, if there were no surprises, then the woman in front of him was one of the 3 half-step transcendence experts of the Gu race, and also Gu Luolin's mother, Qingli. Junior Yi Zichin greets Senior. Ha! Qingli covered her mouth and laughed. That laugh caused the sun and moon to change color, and the flowers to droop. You're rather interesting. You actually call me Senior. Your mother is standing here. She's a member of the Gu family. If we're going by seniority, shouldn't you be calling me Grandma? Yi Zichin's expression darkened. Is there something wrong with this family? Why did they suddenly start talking about seniority? Even when Gu Luolin was around, she'd always emphasized her status as a senior. Qingli did the same. What was even worse was that she wanted him to call her Grandma. Although Yi Zichin knew that Qingli might be tens of thousands of years old, she really did look like she was in her early 20s. However, She only looked like she was in her early 20s. Yizichin really couldn't bring himself to call someone like that grandma. Oomph. Even if Lil Rong is a member of the Gu race, that doesn't mean he has the right to enter. What right does he have to call us relatives? Suddenly, Gu Xuanda snorted from within the clouds. Soon after, a middle-aged man with bright eyes and a face as sharp as a knife walked out from the clouds on the platform. He wore a purple robe, and his gait was as majestic as a dragon's or a tiger's. As he walked over, the surrounding clouds instinctively parted for him. He walked directly in front of Yizichin and looked down at him condescendingly. He hated that look. What Yizichin hated the most was when people looked at him like that. It was as if he thought he was awesome and disdained everyone else, as if they were ants. Yizichin couldn't indulge this sort of person. Without even thinking about it, he glared at him. "You're Yizichin? That's an interesting question. Didn't you already see me when we were outside the city? What's the point of asking again? When the time comes, you made me the #1 person in all of history, and you even gave me such a generous gift as the Holy Dragon Divine Soul. I must thank you." With that, Yizichin bowed slightly to Gu Xuanda to express his gratitude. Gu Xuanda's expression stiffened despite himself. This kid really dared to say such things. If not for his status as a senior, Gu Xuanda really would have slapped Yizichin to death. But Yi Rong was here, so he couldn't argue with Yizichin. He forced down his anger and smiled. Breaking the city's signboard is your ability, and obtaining the Dragon Soul is your fate. This only proves that your luck and strength are first-rate. You fought for it yourself, so there's no need to thank me. Oh, I know that, but my mom's here, so I have to be polite. When Gu Xuanda heard that, his expression stiffened. Qingli had long since suppressed her laughter. She looked at Yizichin and nodded repeatedly. Before coming here, Yizichin had wanted to see Gu Xuanda suffer. Now that he'd fulfilled his wish, and Gu Xuanda was still a half-step transcendent expert, Yizichin didn't dare act rashly. Chapter 17:15. How many years had it been? Ever since Gu Xuanda became the head of the Gu family, no one had ever dared speak to him like that. Qingli was his wife, and he really did spoil her. That was why she'd run her mouth off when they were alone. However, even she would be considerate and comfort Gu Xuanda when he was in a bad mood. The others didn't even need to be mentioned. Never mind glaring at him to anger him. They didn't even dare breathe loudly in his presence. It had been a long time since Gu Xuanda had seen someone who did not know etiquette, had no sense of propriety, and did not know when to back off. "Zichin, how can you speak to the head like that? Apologize," Yi Rong shouted. This was the head of the Gu family. With a single stomp of his foot, he could destroy all 3 races. Even though Yizichin had grown up quickly, he couldn't compare to Gu Xuanda at all. In Yi Rong's memories, Yizichin had always been a well-mannered child. How come now? Could it be that he'd really become arrogant after holding a high position for so long? No matter what, Yi Rong couldn't let Yizichin continue making mistakes like this. If she really angered Gu Xuanda, never mind Yizichin's current upheaval alliance, even 10 of them would be nothing more than a snap of his fingers. The more she thought about it, the more agitated Yi Rong became. "Hurry up and apologize." Yi Rong walked up to Yizichin's back and smacked him hard. Before Yizichin could react, Gu Xuanda laughed. "It's fine. I heard your son has quite the status in the God realm. For a young man to have accomplished so much at such a young age, it's inevitable that he'll pick up some bad habits. I won't lower myself to his level." "Then you're amazing." Yizichin grinned and gave him a thumbs up. However, why did his tone sound like mockery? Really, Gu Xuanda couldn't hold back any longer. He tried to keep his cool several times to avoid bickering with Yizichin, but the kid just kept provoking him. Strangely enough, if anyone else had provoked him like this, Gu Xuanda wouldn't have cared. No giant would care about an ant's provocation. Gu Xuanda could be considered a giant of this era. Others, even emperors, were still ants in his eyes. At most, they were just a bit bigger. They weren't on the same level at all. Provoking him was nothing more than a joke. However, Yizichin was an ant among ants to Gu Xuanda. Gu Xuanda was furious. His entire body trembled uncontrollably, and he felt the urge to strangle Yizichin. The Gu Xuanda wanted to strangle him. Gu Xuanda was already merciful enough that he didn't directly kill Yi Zichen. How could he possibly respond to Yi Zichen's words? After mocking him, Yi Zichen didn't look like he had any intention of continuing. For a moment, the Gu Xuanda the same. Little fellow, you're going a little too far. No matter what, Xuanda is still your senior. Even if you're not a member of the ancient clan, he's still your senior with his realm. How can you talk to him like that? Of course, Qingli wasn't actually blaming Yi Zichen. Rather, it was more of a rebuke. Xuanda, she said, Yi Qing, comma, Yi Gu Qing. You're right, senior. It's my fault for not respecting etiquette. Junior should always remember, even if senior does not act like a senior, junior should still abide by the rules and etiquette. Just now it was my fault. Please punish me. Yi Zichen bowed deeply, then looked up, his gaze sincere. But I really didn't mean to offend you. I was just curious as to why you'd summon me here. You know that I work for the Upheaval Alliance. The timing of the Third Era is a bit ambiguous. We don't know when the outsiders will attack. As the Lord of the Stars, I have the right and responsibility to ensure the safety of the Third Era. Naturally, I have a lot of internal affairs that require my personal attention. I also want to listen to your teachings as soon as possible so I can go back and deal with internal affairs. I'm running around for the greater good. With sharp tongue, Gu Xuanda's expression darkened, but he snorted inwardly. How could he not understand what Yi Zichen was trying to say? What he was trying to say was, don't touch me. I'm the Third Era's Emperor Star. My life is precious. Furthermore, his rudeness was only because he cared about the world. His emotions fluctuated a bit, and his words were a bit rash. If you make an enemy of me, that means you can't tolerate the world. That means you're going against the entire Third Era. Become enemies. Gu Xuanda knew full well that Yi Zichen's words were directed at him. As for why, when Yi Zichen said all this, his eyes were fixed on Gu Xuanda. Qingli didn't think as deeply as Gu Xuanda. She'd only said that to lighten the mood and give her husband a way out of this embarrassing situation. We know you're busy, but we're here for something important as well. More important than the world. When Yi Zichen said that, Qingli wanted a nod. In truth, she and Gu Xuanda had called Yi Zichen over for news of the outsiders. She didn't dare say she was more important than the world, but at the very least, she was doing it for the good of the world. However, young fella, don't always talk about the people in the world. Those who truly care about the people in the world won't talk about it like you do every day. Instead, they'll do it with real actions, Gu Xuanda said. You know that too? You're amazing, said Yi Zichen in a tone that made Gu Xuanda gnash his teeth in anger. However, before long, Yi Zichen's expression changed. Then, why exactly did you call me here? I'm really busy. Not bad, kid. You're so arrogant and despotic even after coming to the Ancients. Busy? If the Ancients wanted to see him, no matter who they were, even if they had important business on their hands, they'd have to drop everything and rush over to see him. I have to teach this kid a lesson. Gu Xuanda thought viciously to himself. His anger had gotten the better of him, and he couldn't be bothered to follow through on the plan he discussed with Qingli. Since you're busy, I won't say anything more. That would be for the best, interrupted Yi Zichen. Gu Xuanda instantly felt his blood boil. He gnashed his teeth, his gaze deep. I wanted to ask you if you'd like to return to the Ancients. Do you want to take on the surname Gu? When Qingli heard that, she stared at Gu Xuanda in shock. That wasn't what they discussed. However, she somewhat understood. Her husband was truly furious. Otherwise, he wouldn't be acting like this. Return to the Ancients? Yi Rong was stunned as well. Then a hint of anticipation flashed through her eyes as she looked at Yi Zichen. She'd always wanted Yi Zichen to join the Ancients. So long as he joined, he'd be a direct descendant of the Ancients. Then, he'd be able to rely on the Ancients' power to fend off their enemies. Unfortunately, she'd never found a suitable opportunity to bring it up with Yi Zichen. This time, Gu Xuanda brought it up of his own accord. From his tone and tone, it seemed like he was offering an olive branch. So long as Yi Zichen nodded, Yi Rong was sure he'd be able to smoothly join the Ancients. As for the conflict between Gu Xuanda and Yi Zichen, she could ask Qingli indirectly to mediate. The most important thing right now was to agree to this. Yi Rong trusted that Yi Zichen was an understanding person. The Gu family was a colossal entity. If he could borrow their help. Chapter 17:16. Yi Zichen rejected her without the slightest hesitation. As soon as he said that, the atmosphere on the tower's platform underwent a complete change. Out of nowhere, a gust of cold wind picked up around tower. The bone-chilling wind made everyone want to pull their clothes closer. The cold wind whistled past, and the surrounding clouds and mist also disappeared under this cold wind. The entire platform became clear. Half a meter away, Yi Rong's eyes flashed with shock. She didn't understand why Yi Zichen would make such a decision. In her opinion, joining the ancient race was the best choice. So long as she could form a relationship with the ancient race. Even if the outsiders attacked, the ancient race wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. Yi Rong absolutely didn't want to rely on the ancient race just because they were powerful. She simply wanted Yi Zichen to have an easier time in the future. She knew that the burden on his shoulders was far too heavy. The demons had yet to resolve their problems, while the Yao and Yao of the southern and northern kingdoms still held a grudge against him. Now that the outsiders had invaded the God realm, practically all of the burden was on his shoulders. As Yi Zichen's mother, she didn't want Yi Zichen to suffer so much. Her cultivation was limited, so the only way she could think of was through the ancient race. Gu Xuanda had extended an olive branch to Yi Zichen. If Yi Zichen agreed, joining the ancient race would be a matter of course. At most, he'd have to take on the surname Gu in the future, but that wasn't a big deal. Yi Rong's surname was Gu. At most, she'd taken back the surname that had once belonged to her. In other words, never mind Yi Zichen, if the ancient race extended an olive branch to any of the God, Yao, and demon clans, they'd refuse. No family could resist the temptation of joining the ancient race. Even giving up their family name, which had been passed down for tens of millions of years, wasn't impossible. Why had Yi Zichen refused? He'd refused without the slightest hesitation. He'd been so resolute. The cold wind blew away the clouds, and the sun in the sky, which was not very hot, sprinkled down white light. Yi Zichen stood a few meters away from Gu Xuanda, his back elongated by the sunlight. His long, narrow eyes narrowed into slits, and his lips curled into a mocking smile that contained a hint of cold determination. It was impossible for him to join the aboriginals. Never mind him. Even great emperors like Shui Yang would ascend to the heavens in a single bound if they joined the ancient race. He knew very well how tempting it was to join the aboriginals, but he's not going in. Although it had been years since he'd last seen Gu Zichen, his tragic past still haunted Yi Zichen's mind like a nightmare. Following the footsteps of history, the future history would not change. He wanted to reverse the tragedy in Gu Zichen's plane, but he also wanted to do it for the sake of his family and friends. No matter what, he wouldn't repeat the same mistake. Even if the future development might be even worse, he decided to take a gamble. There was a long silence. This silence was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. After Yi Zichen rejected him, Gu Xuanda didn't say anything else. He merely stood in front of Yi Zichen and stared deeply into his pitch-black eyes. "Xiaorong, you should go back." All of a sudden, Gu Xuanda waved his hand at Yi Rong calmly. From the way he spoke, it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. However, Yi Rong was incredibly nervous. She pursed her lips as if she wanted to say something, but Yi Zichen chuckled and grabbed her hand. "Don't worry. Perhaps the Gu family head wants to give me some psychological counseling. Don't worry and return to the Star Altar. No matter what, given the Gu family head's lofty status, would he care about a junior like me?" Yi Rong nodded, bowed to Gu Xuanda and Qing Lan, then left. Before she left, Yi Zichen received a divine sense transmission in his sea of consciousness. In response, he simply nodded at Yi Rong, who kept glancing back as she left. His eyes brimmed with smiles. In the end, Yi Rong left the tower. To tell the truth, Yi Zichen still didn't understand why Gu Xuanda had called his mother over. Could it be that he wanted Yi Rong to bear witness to his joining the aboriginals? If that was the case, all he could say was that Gu Xuanda had been a bit overconfident. Without Yi Rong's presence in the tower, the atmosphere once again plunged below zero. Howling cold winds swirled around the platform, and mournful cries filled the air. Yi Zichen maintained his smile the entire time. When he saw that neither Gu Xuanda nor Qinglan had any intention of breaking the silence, he decided he might as well start the conversation again. Family head Gu, I'm very sorry. I betrayed your good intentions. Huh, I'm surprised you're apologizing. Gu Xuanda snorted and sat down in front of a modern coffee table. There was a pot of steaming hot tea on top of the glass table. From the moment he'd entered the ancient city, Yi Zichen marveled at its modern architecture. He really wanted to know why there were such buildings here, and he'd been looking for an opportunity to answer his questions. Now, seemed like the perfect opportunity. Family head Gu, although I can't join the ancient race, I betrayed your good intentions. However, I'm rather puzzled about your ancient city. I hope you can explain it to me. If it were any other virtuous and respected senior, there was a 90% chance that they'd be willing to teach him. Yi Zichen had encountered Gu Xuanda. Although he was also a man of great authority, someone who stood at the very peak of the world, there was no way he was a virtuous and respected senior. Unfortunately, Gu Xuanda was no virtuous and respected senior. Are you surprised that there are so many modern buildings here? Gu Xuanda arched his brows. That's right. When I first entered the city, I noticed that the buildings here are no different from the ones in the modern realm. The elevator I used to get to the top of the tower and the coffee table you're using right now are all products of the modern realm, said Yi Zichen. You want to know why they're here? Asked Gu Xuanda. That's right. Why should I? Gu Xuanda took a sip of his tea, his eyes flashing with ridicule. This ridicule was exactly the same as Yi Zichen's. Everything about the ancient city is a core secret of the ancient race. Since you're not a member of the ancient race, why should I explain your questions to you? Yi Zichen's expression instantly froze. However, Yi Zichen wasn't too surprised. His attitude towards Gu Xuanda wasn't exactly friendly, so it was normal for him to react this way. There was no way to explain Gu Xuanda's suspicions. Since that was the case, Senior, please leave. Yi Zichen wouldn't join the ancient race, and if he couldn't get an explanation for the modern buildings, there was no point in staying. With that, Yi Zichen turned around and headed for the elevator. Chapter 17:17. Yi Zichen, who was walking towards the elevator, suddenly stopped. His body was already warning him that if he took another step forward, his life might end here. The intense sense of danger caused Yi Zichen to be unable to leave recklessly. He took a few deep breaths as he faced the elevator, then clenched his right fist several times. Then, the serious expression on his face turned into a smile as he turned around. Gu! Before he could speak, he saw the coffee table turn to dust. Yi Zichen gulped. Although it wasn't difficult for him to smash the coffee table into dust, Gu Xuanda's actions clearly showed that he was angry. When an emperor was angry, blood flowed for thousands of miles. Although Gu Xuanda wasn't the emperor of the upper three realms, his status was higher than theirs. If he wanted to, he could make the upper three realms his playthings. What's more, if he wanted to kill Yi Zichen here, half-step transcendence. Killing Yi Zichen would only take a flick of his finger. Kid, you're going to get beaten up if you act like this, you know? Gu Xuanda narrowed his eyes, and a cigar appeared in his mouth. He crossed his legs and didn't look like the head of a clan at all. He was clearly just a hooligan. He swung his legs and leaned against the back of the chair, occasionally puffing out a ring of smoke. Don't you know whose territory this is? This is Laozi's territory. Just ask anyone in the surrounding villages. Anyone who runs into me, Gu Xuanda, has to bow down and wag their tail like a dog. Who do you think you are? You think you can come and go as you please? Do I not care about face? Gulp. What's going on? Does Gu Xuanda have a split personality? Does his second personality have to be so sociopathic? Kid, Laozi is talking to you. Don't act like a mute. Weren't you very talkative just now? Gu Xuanda puffed out a puff of smoke and frowned at the shocked Yi Zichen. Senior, is there something wrong with your husband's head? Gu Xuanda's current situation was rather serious. He was like a completely different person. Yi Zichen didn't want to talk to a lunatic, so he could only look towards Qingli. Qingli smiled, but before she could say anything, Gu Xuanda threw the cigar in his hand onto the ground. Who did you say has a mental problem? Say it again if you have the guts. His expression made it seem as if he wanted to skin Yi Zichen alive. The cigar he'd tossed to the ground rolled several meters away. Green smoke rose from the black end of the cigar. Gu Xuanda also slapped his chair and wanted to fight Yi Zichen, but he didn't move for a long time. Qingli, what are you doing? Hurry up and stop me. Oh, whoa, okay. When Qingli heard that, she ran over. Gu Xuanda also stood up from his chair and shouted as if he was about to fight Yi Zichen to the death. Don't stop me. I must kill this brat today to go with my wine. His brain must be damaged. Yi Zichen stood a few meters away and watched Gu Xuanda act like a monkey in shock. Just then the cigar rolled to the bottom of his foot. He bent down and picked up the cigar, wanted to see if it was also a product of the modern world. Who told you to touch it? The moment the cigar entered his hand, Yi Zichen felt a suction force pull it into Gu Xuanda's. Then Gu Xuanda put the cigar in his mouth, causing Yi Zichen to grimace in disdain. Yi Zichen was certain that Gu Xuanda's mental illness was acting up, and it was quite serious. At a time like this, he needed to call the mental hospital and receive systematic treatment. People like Gu Xuanda, who posed a threat to society, needed to be treated meticulously. Unfortunately, the gods, Yaos, and demons didn't have such an organization. Family head Gu, please calm down. Anger is bad for your health. You had to go along with this kind of manic patient. Yi Zichen bowed with a smile. At that moment, Gu Xuanda was no longer as irritated as before. He snorted coldly, then sat back down on the wooden chair. You're scared now? Scared, too scared. You're the Gu family head, a peerless expert half-step into the transcending realm. This junior is but a ruler. I haven't even condensed a Tao heart. How can I not be scared of you? At least you know what's good for you. Gu Xuanda snorted haughtily, still holding the cigar in his mouth. In that case, I'll ask you again. Are you going to join the Gu race or not? I'm not joining. That's more like it. Gu Xuanda sneered subconsciously. Suddenly, the satisfied look on his face disappeared, and he took out his cigar. He glared at him and asked, What did you say just now? I don't think I heard it clearly. Then you should get a doctor to examine you, said Yi Zichen. I said I'm not joining. You bastard. This time, Qingli understood. As soon as Gu Xuanda glared at her, she hurriedly blocked his path. No matter how he struggled, he couldn't get up. Qingli, hurry up and open the barrier. Gu Xuanda glared at her. What's wrong? Didn't you tell me to stop you? Asked Qingli in confusion. There's no need for you to stop me. This little bastard really is going to piss me off. I have to strangle him to death. Gu Xuanda was beyond furious. Divine power surged around him, and before Qingli could undo the barrier, he'd already broken it. Yi Zichen stood a few meters away, only to feel a fierce gust of wind brush past his face. A blur flashed before his eyes. By the time he came to his senses, Gu Xuanda was already in front of him, his right hand tightly gripping Yi Zichen's collar. Raging divine power surged around Yi Zichen. There was no way Yi Zichen could withstand the power of a half-step transcendent expert. In the blink of an eye, Yi Zichen's azure robes were torn to shreds, revealing the swirling flash armor he'd been wearing underneath. You're pretty smart. You know you're wearing divine battle armor underneath. Gu Xuanda's expression was solemn, but he didn't retract his grip on Yi Zichen's collar. I just don't know if that shitty divine artifact of yours can withstand spatial turbulence and storms. What do you mean? Before Yi Zichen could respond, he saw Gu Xuanda's left hand swipe through the air. It was as if the space around them had been sliced open and a giant crack appeared. Xuanda. This time, even Qingli couldn't hold back. Earlier, she'd only been joking, but now, Gu Xuanda really wanted to teach Yi Zichen a lesson. Chapter 17-18. This situation was a bit difficult to deal with. It wasn't that Yi Zichen hadn't been to the outside before, but he'd only been to stable spaces. He'd never come into contact with a spatial rift as violent as the one before him. The rift opened up like a balloon, and a raging spatial storm swept through it. Yi Zichen glanced at the rift. The power of the spatial storm made him feel uneasy. He knew very well that this was his body's instincts warning him that he couldn't withstand a spatial storm like this. If he slipped up and fell inside, given his cultivation, he'd have a hard time surviving. The spatial storm wreaked havoc, and the cracks in the shattered dimensional space grew bigger and bigger. Yi Zichen could practically feel the spatial storm within the fissure brush against his face. How did things end up like this? Yi Zichen knew he'd gone a bit overboard just now. He disrespected Gu Xuanda, but that wasn't entirely his fault. Gu Xuanda had given him a show of strength as soon as he'd entered the city. If it weren't for Yi Zichen's strength, he might not even have been able to enter. After entering the tower, Gu Xuanda's tone was as cold as ever, and he'd inexplicably asked Yi Zichen to join the Gu race. Although Yi Zichen's upheaval alliance couldn't compare to the Gu race, he'd built it up bit by bit. He'd worked so hard to build up his faction, yet Gu Xuanda wanted him to submit to him with a single word. How could Yi Zichen agree? Besides, an invitation had to be sincere. Gu Xuanda's forceful attitude was forcing people to submit. What did he think he was? A gangster? If this were a society governed by law, he'd be shot. But no matter how much Yi Zichen resisted, the situation was already like this. No matter how forceful Gu Xuanda was, this wasn't the modern realm he'd once lived in. There was good law and order here. This was the upper realm. Here, Gu Xuanda was the local tyrant, and the Gu race was a peak-level clan whose mere mention made all other races tremble in fear. In a place like this, where the Gu race ruled alone, Yi Zichen had no place to complain. Clan head Gu. Yi Zichen chuckled and reached out to brush the dust off Gu Xuanda's shoulders. Unfortunately, Gu Xuanda had him by the collar, so Yi Zichen couldn't lift his arm. He could only hang in midair and smile awkwardly. Why are you so angry? We can sit down and talk about it. Although the request to join the ancient race is hard to accept, as long as we sit down and discuss it properly, it is not impossible. Don't talk so much nonsense. I don't have the patience. Gu Xuanda exerted force with his right hand and lifted Yi Zichen up, then placed him near the fissure. Yi Zichen heard the howling spatial tempest. His ear, which was closest to the spatial fissure, was already bleeding. Crimson blood dripped down his ear and into the fissure, only to be instantly swallowed up by the spatial tempest. Based on the amount of time the drop of blood had spent in the spatial storm, Yi Zichen could roughly estimate that if he'd entered, he definitely wouldn't have lasted more than an hour. More importantly, the Aboriginals belonged to a dimensional space. This kind of space was separated from the Vermilion space. It was much more difficult to find an exit in such a spatial rift than to accidentally fall into a spatial rift on the main plane. Clan leader Gu, let's talk this out. Are you going to join or not? Gu Xuanda ignored Yi Zichen's words completely. He continued to drag Yi Zichen into the spatial rift. I'm the head of an alliance, after all. I have over a dozen emperors working for me. Practically everyone in the God realm is my people, and the Yao of the East are on good terms with me. If I join the Aboriginals, shouldn't you give me some benefits? Even if you don't, you should at least bribe my subordinates. Joining the Aboriginals is their past life's blessing. Bribe your subordinates? Don't even think about it. Don't talk to me about all that nonsense. I'm just asking you, are you going to join or not? He really believed himself to be infallible. Just look at what Gu Xuanda had just said. Joining the Aboriginals was their past life's blessing. He was truly blindly confident. Although the ancient race was one of the top races, it did not mean that everyone would want to join the ancient race. The way Yi Zichen saw it, there was no way the sacred ones of the God realm would rush to join the Aboriginals. No matter what, they all had their own legacies and histories. Abandoning their clans for the sake of ascending to the heavens was not something they would choose. Besides, although their status in the upper three realms couldn't compare to the Aboriginals, they were still at the peak. Gu Xuanda, on the other hand, was forcing people to join his clan without giving them any benefits. He wanted to swallow up the fruits of their labor and wealth. He really wasn't afraid of bursting to death. If they just talked things over, Yi Zichen might have given Gu Xuanda some face in light of the current dire situation, But Gu Xuanda was acting like this. At Yi Zichen's level, who wouldn't have a temper? When he heard Gu Xuanda's words, Yi Zichen's fury was instantly ignited. Then don't even think about it. You want me to join your crappy clan? Not even a chance. If you think you can, throw me in there. It'd be best if I die in there. If I come out alive, one day, I'll slaughter your entire clan. Yi Zichen glared at him angrily. His words were full of gunpowder. Qingli, who'd wanted to stop him, covered her mouth in shock. Her eyes widened. Earlier, she'd wanted to comfort Gu Xuanda and tell him not to hold it against Yi Zichen. However, the instant Yi Zichen said those words, Qingli knew there was no hope. Although Gu Xuanda was quite playful in private, Qingli knew that in his heart, nothing was more important than the Aboriginals. Even if Yi Zichen said he'd slaughter the Aboriginals out of anger, it was still not something Gu Xuanda could tolerate. What did you just say? I said, you'd best throw me in there and let me die. If I come out, I'll slaughter your entire clan, especially you, you old geezer. I dare you to say that again. I won't repeat myself twice. Don't bullshit me. If you have the guts, then throw me in. Yi Zichen's eyes practically spat fire, but Gu Xuanda reacted the same way. His grip on Yi Zichen's neck trembled uncontrollably. Then, he lifted Yi Zichen high into the air and lifted him above the spatial rift. Xuanda, don't. Chapter 17-19. The moment Gu Xuanda let go, he foretold what Yi Zichen was about to face. The moment Yi Zichen fell into the spatial fissure, Gu Xuanda thought to himself that if he wasn't mistaken, the falling Yi Zichen should have made a middle finger gesture. This was an ancient city built entirely of modern architecture. How could Gu Xuanda not know what that finger represented? You little bastard. When Yi Zichen was thrown into the rift, he angrily lashed out at him with a blast of divine power, causing him to fall even more violently. Then he closed the rift. Out of sight, out of mind. By the time Qingli arrived, the rift had already healed. She stared blankly at the spatial rift, then thought back to the turbulent spatial storms within. Her expression froze involuntarily. You're crazy. Crazy? I'm very rational right now. That little bastard doesn't know what's good for him, so I'm teaching him a lesson. He's already very kind to me not to pay his tuition. How did I become crazy? Gu Xuanda sat back in his chair. He could tell that Yi Zichen had truly infuriated him. Even now, his chest heaved up and down heavily. Invisible milky white air puffed out of his nostrils. That was true. He really was rational enough. If he'd really lost his mind, he wouldn't have just thrown Yi Zichen into the spatial turbulence. He'd have strangled him to death on the spot. Do you know what you threw him into? Qingli's lips quivered for a long while before she managed to speak. Isn't it just a spatial rift? You know, Qingli nearly jumped up in anger. She pointed at the spatial rift and shouted, a spatial rift. A spatial fault. Even martial emperors would find it hard to walk out alive. What's more, we're in a spatial rift. The chances of survival are even lower. Lil Rong's child is at most a divine general. Throwing him in there is no difference from killing him on the spot. So what? How are you going to explain it to Lil Rong? Do I need to explain it to her? Gu Xuanda glared at him. I'm the head of the Gu clan. She's just a direct descendant of the Gu clan. I can do whatever I want. Do I need to explain it to her? Gu Xuanda was furious. If he had not smashed the coffee table into powder, he might have smashed the table too. To his surprise, Qingli, who had been shouting at him earlier, suddenly pouted her lips and burst into tears. Literally, don't touch me, Qingli said with a wronged expression. You actually dared to be mean to me just now. You even yelled at me that you would spoil me when we got married. I even gave birth to a daughter for you. Don't cry. I was wrong. Gu Xuanda squatted beside Qingli. The anger in his eyes had long disappeared. It was my fault just now. It's all that brat Yi Zichen's fault. My anger is directed at him, not at you. Don't cry, okay? Even if you're angry, you can't throw him down. If what the white robe man said is true, then Yi Zichen won't die at all. I'm sure of that. Gu Xuanda patted Qingli's shoulder. At this moment, the elevator door of the tower suddenly opened. Gu Luolin, who had her hair in pigtails, skipped over and saw the scene in front of her. Both Qingli and Gu Xuanda quickly regained their usual composure. Gu Xuanda looked at Gu Luolin with a serious expression. Why did you come back? Gu Luolin's fear towards Gu Xuanda came from the bottom of her heart. Gu Luolin, who clearly noticed that Qingli had cried, did not dare to say anything when she saw Gu Luolin's gaze. She merely lowered her head and twirled her fingers. I forgot about something. What can't you say later? No, it's rather urgent. Gu Luolin licked her lips. Gu Luolin licked her lips, and the ponytail on her head swayed. Her quick-witted eyes carefully scanned her surroundings. Huh, where's my nephew? Did he already leave? As the saying goes, you have to touch a sore spot. Gu Xuanda's expression instantly darkened when she mentioned Yi Zichen. Gu Luolin quickly lowered her head when she noticed the change in his expression. Qingli couldn't help but glare at Gu Xuanda, then walked in front of Gu Luolin and whispered, Already left. He has already left. What else do you want from him? Oh, actually, I'm not looking for him. It's you, Mother. It was obvious that Gu Luolin was still nervous. As she spoke, she pinched the hem of her clothes, afraid that Gu Xuanda would yell at her. What's wrong, Mother? Asked Qingli gently. Didn't you say I had an uncle? You just separated a long time ago, and you've been looking for him this whole time. That's right, what's wrong? I went to the Transcendence Palace to play. I think I saw him. Gu Luolin's voice grew softer and softer until it was almost inaudible. Even so, Qingli still heard everything she said. Her eyes blazed with a fiery light. Her fervent eagerness caused the temperature around the platform to soar. You saw your uncle Qingluan? That's right. I saw him with Yi Zichen, and it seems he's on good terms with him. Suddenly, Qingli's body stiffened. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda. It had to be the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. She'd wondered if Qingli had entered the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Ever since Qingli became a half-step transcendence cultivator, she'd searched for Qingluan for 10,000 years. She'd visited the outer realms, the liches, and even the god realms. The only place she hadn't gone was a spatial divine artifact. She'd wondered if Qingluan was in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, but she knew how strong he was. The Five Elements' great emperor wasn't strong enough to capture him. There was only one explanation for Qingluan entering the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. As she considered this, Qingli asked anxiously, Then does your uncle Qingluan have anyone else with him? Yes. Gu Luolin nodded and said, Uncle Qingluan has an uncle with great strength. I think that uncle's strength is stronger than that of Dad and Mom. Big brother Tsang Xiong, said Qingli. That's right. Gu Luolin nodded vigorously. I think Yi Zichen called him Uncle Tsang Xiong. Gu Luolin, Qingli, and her mother kept talking to each other, but Gu Xuanda, who was standing behind them, somehow had a bad feeling about this. He'd been worried about this possibility, so he hadn't dared interrupt. In fact, he even considered sneaking away. Stop right there. Just as Gu Xuanda was about to slip away, Qingli's cold voice exploded in his ears. Chapter 1720. Outside the realm. The vastness of the universe was something humans would never be able to fully grasp. In this vast, primordial space, three tiny figures shuttled back and forth. No matter how fast they moved, they couldn't cause even the slightest ripple. Gone. They stopped in the midst of the primordial space. All they could see was darkness and primal chaos. Behind them, they could vaguely make out a few tiny, dust-like planets. The one who spoke was none other than the great sage, who'd transformed into a supreme treasure and was clad in fairy Zixia's matching robes. He hefted the Rui Jingu Bang, his fiery eyes of gold twinkling. In the darkness of the primordial chaos, they were like two bright lanterns. He looked around, his hands still on his eyebrows. He bent down slightly, as if searching for something. Monkey, what's wrong with you? We trusted you so much, yet you're telling us you lost it? Yang Jian couldn't help but glare. The three people in the sky were, of course, the great sage, Yang Jian, and Su Luer, the queen of the foxes who'd been sent outside to investigate the Yuan Breaker Beast. Didn't you say your fiery eyes of gold could see us? We've been chasing that big guys, asked the whole time, and now you're telling me it's gone? When Yang Jian and the others had come to investigate the Yuan Breaker Beast, they'd first gone to the area surrounding the annihilated advance guard. Speaking of which, they were lucky. When they arrived, the Yuan Breaker Beast was still happily enjoying its meal. Naturally, they also saw the heroes who died tragically at the Yuan Breaker Beast's hands. They ran into Yang Jian and the others, and, as expected, the three of them attacked the Yuan Breaker Beast. Just as Su Luer had said, the Yuan Breaker Beast in the video was truly ferocious. Even Imperial Lords like them couldn't help but shudder when they saw it. However, when they actually clashed with the beast, they realized the Yuan Breaker Beast wasn't as fierce as they'd imagined. It was undeniable that the Yuan Breaker Beast was somewhat strong, but that was only because of its enormous size. That was its advantage. Unfortunately, its attacks were too simplistic. Or perhaps it was better to say that it was unintelligent and only retained the most primitive instincts of a wild beast. Meeting Yang Jian and the others had also determined the fate of this Yuan-breaking beast. After fighting for less than an hour, this Yuan-breaking beast, which was several hundred feet tall, was already severely injured. It knew that it was no match for him and fled. The size of its body did not affect its agility at all. It could also be that it had an advantage in the void of primal chaos that belonged to its species. Even with their speed, Yang Jian and the others were unable to catch up to it. They could only follow behind it, following the smell of blood in its back. However, because their journey was too long, they were already in the primal chaos. Fortunately, after becoming a ruler, his need for oxygen was no longer as severe. Although there was no air in the chaos void that humans could rely on to survive, Yang Jian and the others could absorb other elements to prevent themselves from suffocating. However, the special environment still caused their divine senses to be unable to extend beyond a kilometer. In this environment, Yang Jian's heavens, I could only see about 2 kilometers away. Only the great sage's fiery eyes of truth could see everything clearly from 10,000 meters away. As a result, the job of leading the way naturally fell onto the great sage's shoulders. Who would have thought that in less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the great sage would lose track of him? Monkey! Yang Jian sighed heavily. He pointed at the great sage, unable to say anything for a long time. If they lost the injured Yuan Breaker Beast, then their only lead would be cut off. They would no longer be able to truly investigate the situation of the Outer Realm gods. Fortunately, they did not return empty-handed. At the very least, they knew that the Yuan Break Beast was not as fierce as they had imagined. Its strength was at most at the Emperor Realm. If they sent enough Dominators, they would be able to kill it. Moreover, its attacks were simple. It had no self-awareness. The intelligent human race and the intelligent demon race had an advantage. This time, the rare great sage didn't retort. He knew that losing the Yuan Breaker Beast was his problem. Earlier, he'd confidently patted his chest and guaranteed that there wouldn't be any mistakes. What do we do now? The great sage licked his lips, his expression unnatural. What else can we do? Let's go back and tell Yi and the others about our findings. Hopefully, it'll be of some use. Yang Jian shrugged. Actually, he was unwilling to give up. They'd already chased to this point. They were so close to catching the Yuan Breaker Beast. They might even know where the Outer Realm God's nest was. The only disadvantage the Third Era had against the Outer Realm Gods was the enemy's mysteriousness. They didn't know how the Outer Realm Gods' experts were, nor where their nest was. It was because of this unknown that the Third Era's people were shrouded in darkness. Even more infuriating was that even if the Outer Realm Gods' attack failed, they could return to their nest to rest. The Third Era didn't know where their nest was, so they could only defend bitterly. Just a little more. Yang Jian clenched his fists tightly. However, no matter how unwilling he was, it was useless. The trail had already been cut off. The Yuan Breaker Beast must have found a safe place to recuperate. While they were here, it might have already returned to the clan. Even if the great sage stayed here, it wouldn't help. Perhaps when a Yuan Breaker Beast recovered, it would bring its clansmen to cause trouble. Although they were elite Imperial Lords and could take on several Yuan Breaker Beasts on their own, No one knew how many clansmen the Yuan Breaker Beast would bring with it. However, nobody knew how many clansmen the Aura Breaker Beast would bring with it. What's more, Yi Zichen had already said that the Aura Breaker Beast was merely the lowest level of existence. Above them were gods with intelligence. Those gods were undoubtedly much stronger than the Yuan Breaker Beast. Perhaps they were even beast tamers. With them leading the way, the Yuan Breaker Beast's lack of intelligence would actually become its advantage. The great sage agreed with their decision to go back the way they'd come. However, they didn't leave right away. They knew full well that Su Luer had the final say. They'd come to the outside because they'd followed her. Luer, the great sage, was Yuan Hong's older brother, so he was somewhat close to Su Luer. He whispered to Su Luer, but Su Luer didn't respond in the slightest. She didn't seem to have any intention of retreating, either. Let's go back. The great sage couldn't help but ask. Yang Jie nodded. To his surprise, Su Luer advanced another 100 meters. Because she cultivated the breath of ice, her hair had long since turned silver white. Chapter 17:21. Ice surged. The Fox Empress had once said that Su Luer's talent for ice was even greater than hers. Earlier, during the Central Divine Mountain's Heavenly God City competition, Su Luer's breath of ice had already revealed its true power. Even the Holy Maiden had found it difficult to defend against it. After so much time had passed, her breath of ice had grown even more powerful. Empress Su Qingyan had also deliberately trained her, so her breath of ice had reached a frightening level. There was no movement of air, but as Su Luer unleashed her divine power, a storm of ice appeared. With her, as the center, the surrounding primal chaos was covered in frost and snow. Big sis, don't tell me you want to seal off the entire area? Off in the distance, Yang Jian couldn't help but gulp at the sight of Su Luer, who looked like a queen of ice and snow. The surrounding space was simply too vast, and the surrounding elemental essence was extremely sparse. No matter how you looked at it, it was a crazy idea to seal it all in ice. The storm of ice wreaked havoc. In the blink of an eye, the pitch-black primal chaos had transformed into a world of ice and snow. Although it was still pitch-black, a layer of pure white ice had formed beneath the primal chaos. Ice had the effect of shaping. Any kind of concealment effect would have nowhere to hide under the shape of the ice. The great sage and Yang Jian, who wanted to leave earlier, stay behind. If Su Luer didn't leave, they naturally wouldn't abandon her. So, they opened their heavenly eyes and flame eyes and used Su Luer's ice to search for any traces left behind by the Aura Breaker beasts. Monkey, come here. Suddenly, Yang Jian dashed several 100 meters to his left. When the great sage heard this, he hurried over and saw an especially large layer of ice condensing in front of him. He leapt into the air and looked down. This layer of ice. Footprints. The great sage's eyes lit up. Only that Aura Breaker beast could leave behind such enormous footprints. Yes, these are footprints. Not only that, but look around. There are traces of dry blood. Yang Jian nodded, but when they saw the footprints, they couldn't help but glance at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. This shock was directed at Su Luer, primal chaos. The space in front of him was a stretch of primal chaos. Even if there were any traces left behind in this void, they would be erased by the surging primal chaos. On her own, Su Luer had frozen the surging primordial chaos with her icy aura. And the blood of the Yuan-breaking beast, what kind of strength was that? What are you waiting for? Why aren't you chasing him? At that moment, Su Luer suddenly appeared beside them. By the time they came to their senses, Su Luer was already several 100 meters ahead. Releasing the ice-cold aura, the entire icy space was under his control. Everything that appeared inside was within her perception. The moment the ferocious beast's footprints appeared, she already knew the direction of the beast's footprints. Naturally, she didn't need to come here to confirm it. She directly chased after the beast. Furthermore, she knew that the footprints were very fresh, as were the frozen blood. From this, it could be deduced that the Yuan Breaker beast wouldn't be able to run for long. Perhaps the Yuan Breaker beast had been right next to them, but had used its life force to hide in the chaos. Even the great sage's fiery eyes of truth couldn't detect its presence. Seeing that Su Lu'er had already chased after it, Yang Jian and the great sage exchanged a glance, then chased after it. The footprints are getting fresher and fresher, and so is the blood. Since the yuan-breaking beast could hide in the primal chaos, the great sage's task was now Su Lu'er, who could use the ice-cold aura to create its tracks. Every 1,000 meters they chased after the footprints, they would stop and use the ice-cold aura to form the yuan-breaking beast's footprints and continue their pursuit. Even as they paused, the yuan-breaking beast's footprints and blood became fresher and fresher. It was clear that the yuan-breaking beast's injuries were severe, and it was on the verge of exhaustion. The clues were right in front of them. The trio sped up, but after chasing for tens of thousands of meters, Yang Jian's brows furrowed. The footprints are getting fresher and fresher. After them, Su Lu'er once again used the ice-cold aura to form the footprints, then retracted it into her body. She'd used the ice-cold aura so frequently, and she couldn't recover her divine power in the void. Her face was already pale. Even so, after condensing the footprints, she still led the charge. This time, however, Yang Jian pulled her back. Take a pill to recover divine power. Monkey, you too. It won't be too late to take it after we catch the yuan-breaking beast. It's already on the verge of exhaustion. Even if I can't participate in the battle, the two of you are more than enough to subdue it. Su Lu'er furrowed her brows. Let's not waste time here. It took so much effort to get so close to it. If we delay any longer, it's definitely going to get away. With a wave of her hand, Su Lu'er chased after it. The great sage listened to Yang Jian and tossed a pill into his mouth. As the two of them chased after Su Lu'er, he said, "Oh, Yang, did you notice something wrong? Monkey, don't you think it's strange? Monkey, don't you think it's strange? Don't you feel like we've been tricked?" said Yang Jian, his gaze grave. What do you mean? The great sage didn't understand. From the very beginning, we thought that yuan-breaking beast was on the verge of exhaustion and couldn't run for much longer. But as you can see, we've already chased it for almost 100,000 meters, but we still haven't caught it. We can only eat its dust from behind, said Yang Jian. That's not a problem, is it? Even wild beasts have a desire to live. That's true. Just as Yang Jian spoke, Su Lu'er stopped in front of him. She released her ice-cold aura and condensed the yuan-breaking beast's footprints. She'd used the ice-cold aura so frequently and hadn't recovered at all. In the end, she couldn't help but cough up a mouthful of blood. Even so, she didn't care. She madly circulated the power of ice in her body. Until footprints. So many footprints. After Su Lu'er released her ice-cold aura, Yang Jian and the others no longer saw a single set of footprints. Instead, they saw hundreds, even thousands. They were right in the middle of these footprints, completely surrounded by them. Oh no! Yang Jian was the first to glare at Su Lu'er, grab her by the arm, and charge out.